Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Blessings and peace upon our Master Muhammad and on his family and his companions, perfect peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. Peace to all. We are very honoured and happy to welcome you all this evening to the online Bridging Spiritual Cultures event, Spirituality in Times of COVID-19. My name is Abdul Malik Lubelski. I work in public administration and community development here in the UK, and I am one of your hosts coming to you from London this evening. We very much hope you will enjoy the reflections, conversations, singing, remembrance, and sharing of spiritual experience that all our different contributors have prepared for you this evening. Bridging Spiritual Cultures, BSPC, is a UK-based educational charity. We are all volunteers and we work together to organise public and online events and programmes with the aim of deepening and widening understanding of the contribution of Sufi education and Islamic spirituality. The core values of Sufism, peace, mercy, love, coexistence and mutual aid, bring the spiritual dimension of Islam to life as a path of inner and outer peace. So, in this way, BSPC also aims to create positive exchange and dialogue to share the living tradition and practice of Sufism at the heart of Islam's spiritual heritage. By promoting the common roots of spiritual aspiration and universal values across human cultures, we hope to strengthen mutual cooperation and understanding at all levels. The aim of this evening is to reflect on the experience of pandemic within our different communities, as well as from a Sufi perspective. We shall be sharing the conversations we have had over the past few weeks with many different individuals within the UK and elsewhere across the globe. Although we all, of course, need to understand and acknowledge the grief and loss that has impacted and continues to impact us all through this crisis. As we move into recovery and post-pandemic times, we also want to celebrate the hope of a more invigorated spiritual future. And, above all, to affirm the benefit of spiritual reflection, practice, and connection with each other in times of difficulty, test, and tribulation. So, although we are coming to you from the UK, we have diverse and international participants from France, Belgium, Spain, Morocco, and the USA, as well as the United Nations, all reflecting their different perspectives and circumstances, but essentially sharing the same common human response to adversity. In developing this event, we owe much thanks to many. But first and foremost, we would like to thank Sidi Jamal Al-Qadri Bouchish, the teacher of the Tariqa Al-Qadriya Al-Bouchishiyya, which is a path of Sufi education of this time, and Sidi Moulay Moulnir Al-Qadri Bouchish, the president of the Multaqa Foundation in Morocco, for their continuous and generous inspiration, guidance, blessing, and support. We would also like to thank everyone from amongst all the volunteers across organisations such as VSMF in France and VSMB in Belgium, Adalil in Spain, and the Multaqa Foundation in Morocco. And most of all, we thank Allah the Most High for His favour in bringing us together to share in His blessings and knowledge, and for the blessing of being able to ask for His blessings. As the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Ask Allah for His favour. Verily, Allah Almighty loves to be asked. And among the best acts of worship is to wait in expectation of relief. وَأَفْضَلُ الْإِبَادَةِ انْتِظَارُ الْفَرَجِ." So, without further expectation or delay, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague Asma Ajaz Ali from the Zawiya Trust in Birmingham, who will be presenting the programme for tonight with me. Assalamu alaikum and good evening, Lala Asma.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, Sidi Abdul Malik. Thank you for that introduction and welcome to our dear guests. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace to all of you. Just before we begin, my name is Asma Ejaz Ali, as Sidi said, and I have worked for national governing bodies and in the community for over 30 years. I'm currently working for the Commonwealth Games as a community engagement officer. It's beautiful and great that you could all be here with us this evening today, and I would like to give you a warm welcome as part of Bridging Spiritual Cultures this evening. We are broadcasting live from London and Birmingham in the UK, but we know that you are joining us from across the world. First, let's start with some Quranics recitation of Surat Al-Azab.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا وسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا هو الذي يصلي عليكم وملائكته ليخرجكم من الظلمات إلى النور وكان بالمؤمنين رحيما تحيتهم يوم يلقونه سلام وأعد لهم أجرا كريما يا أيها النبي إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا وبشر المؤمنين بأن لهم من الله فضلا كبيرا صدق الله العظيم.
Sadaqallahu Azim. Many thanks to Sidi Ali Spy from Washington for that beautiful recitation. And I now have the great honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Moulay Munir Al-Qadri Bouchiche, who is the president of the Multaqah Foundation in Morocco. His talk is entitled The Place of Sufism and Its Values of Spiritual Education in Managing Moments of Crisis. Dr. Moulay Munir, many thanks.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. Bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Salam alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Je suis heureux de vous retrouver à l'occasion de cette rencontre virtuelle dans laquelle nous sommes loin par les corps, mais proches par les cœurs, pour partager un moment de convivialité et de spiritualité. Le sujet de mon intervention, c'est la place du soufisme et ses valeurs d'éducation spirituelle dans la gestion des moments de crise. Avec la crise mondiale que nous traversons depuis plus d'un an, l'une des leçons fondamentales est la nécessité de nous rassembler dans la coopération et l'unité. Car toutes les solutions aux multiples crises que nous traversons, soit sanitaires, soit environnementales, morales et politiques, viendront d'un effort collectif pour mettre en pratique des actions concertées et solidaires. Face au déclin des valeurs, le soufisme incarne cette dimension spirituelle de l'islam basée sur le bel agir et la noblesse du comportement. L'éducation soufie perpétue les valeurs universelles nobles de respect d'autrui, de paix et de vivre ensemble. C'est pourquoi le soufisme peut contribuer à promouvoir les valeurs et l'éthique de l'islam telles qu'enseignées par les maîtres soufis. Le soufisme participe aussi au rapprochement entre les civilisations, les religions et les cultures. L'amour d'autrui, le respect de la différence, le non-jugement, le sens du service, le don de soi sont autant des valeurs universelles et humaines essentielles dans l'éducation soufie. C'est par le biais de ces valeurs transmises avec douceur, patience et bienveillance que le message prophétique a pu élever les âmes et les esprits vers la noblesse du comportement, ce qui est l'objectif des trois religions monothéistes. Ces vertus et ces qualités enseignées dans le soufisme, aujourd'hui, représentent un réservoir précieux de sagesse et de savoir-vivre capable d'inspirer l'humanité tout entière dans un monde en crise et qui souffre d'un vide spirituel. Le philosophe et soufi écrivain René Guénon disait à ce sujet dans son livre célèbre « La crise du monde moderne » que le spirituel guide le temporel. Face à l'épreuve de la pandémie qui frappe l'humanité, il est nécessaire de se doter de ces valeurs spirituelles, universelles, nobles pour soulager le monde, retrouver l'équilibre et accéder au bonheur partagé. Le soufisme nous éduque à cultiver une spiritualité active et à développer une sagesse qui nous permet de voir les opportunités dans les moments difficiles tels que mentionnés dans ce verset coranique dans la Surat 94, l'ouverture à Sharh, car avec la difficulté, il y a la facilité, avec la difficulté, il y a la facilité. Cette capacité à transformer toute épreuve en bien est l'un des secrets de l'éducation spirituelle. C'est pourquoi, derrière l'épreuve de la pandémie, nous devons voir une opportunité de revenir sur l'essentiel, à commencer par notre rapport avec le divin, avec Dieu, et à nous-mêmes, comme l'a dit le célèbre Soufi Ibn Ata'illah Yaskandari dans ses paroles de sagesse. Lorsqu'il t'éloigne des créatures, sache qu'il veut par là t'ouvrir la porte de son intimité. Car on accède ainsi dans l'arène de la méditation où nous retrouvons une source divine d'énergie et de lumière que nous ressource intérieurement et qui rejaillit ensuite sur l'extérieur. Comme dit l'adage soufi, l'extérieur reflète l'état de l'intérieur. L'éducation soufie réalise la réforme intérieure par la purification du cœur des souillures, des mauvaises pensées et des attachements au monde matériel. Comme le dit le hadith authentique du prophète, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, il y a dans le corps un morceau de chair qui, s'il est sain, rend tout le corps sain. Mais s'il est corrompu, tout le corps devient corrompu. Eh bien, il s'agit du cœur, le roi des facultés. L'éducation soufie éduque l'âme et apaise le cœur. Elle nous permet aussi d'agir comme des citoyens actifs et responsables en étant utiles aux autres. Par exemple, face au problème des fake news, des rumeurs et des fausses informations qui circulent sur la pandémie et qui impactent la confiance dans la gestion publique, le soufisme met toujours l'accent sur la sincérité de l'intention dans nos actes et nos paroles. Dans les moments de doute et de crise, ces valeurs nous donnent alors de l'apaisement et de la sérénité afin d'agir de manière consciente et bénéfique pour notre entourage, pour notre société, notre pays, et pour faire valoir l'intérêt collectif sur l'intérêt individuel. L'éducation soufie, à travers le compagnonnage du maître vivant et l'invocation qui tranquillise et nourrit le cœur, permet à chacune et à chacun de jouer un rôle positif dans sa vie personnelle et professionnelle, en préservant la paix, l'unité, l'entraide et le vivre ensemble sans condition, sans contrepartie et avec une quête permanente d'excellence, comme le disait le grand soufi Ibn Arabi, englobe par la miséricorde et la douceur tous les animaux et toutes les créatures. Ne prive personne qui demande de l'aide, même par une bonne parole, ou encore œuvre pour le bien sans voir pour qui tu le fais et accroche-toi à chaque bonne qualité, tu seras alors un homme du bien. Tu seras alors un homme de bien. La crise actuelle nous offre, à vrai dire, l'opportunité d'un renouveau spirituel et d'une renaissance intérieure par la pratique du travail sur soi, de l'amélioration du comportement et de la lutte contre l'égoïsme et les désirs destructeurs. La quête du bel agir et du bon comportement, fruit de l'éducation soufie, deviennent alors des moyens de célébrer le divin en s'ouvrant à l'autre, au partage et à la solidarité, tout en cultivant le civisme, la paix et l'harmonie sociale. Nous devons donc accueillir cette épreuve comme une opportunité de mener le plus grand des combats contre notre ego et nos passions, car c'est la seule manière de goûter à une paix intérieure véritable et durable, qui est la seule garantie d'une paix extérieure commune, permettant l'épanouissement de tous. Par la transmission d'une culture d'amour, de miséricorde, de solidarité, l'enseignement spirituel du soufisme contribue à promouvoir une citoyenneté responsable, efficace et engagée au service de la communauté humaine et de l'ensemble des créatures. Nous devons dès lors voir dans l'épreuve actuelle une opportunité unique de nous transformer et de transformer nos sociétés à travers la propagation des valeurs universelles. et d'exemples de comportements responsables et citoyens à travers la mise en place d'actions solidaires au service de l'humanité et de la préservation de son environnement. Il est en effet temps pour nous d'accomplir la vocation universelle du soufisme, telle qu'elle est résumée dans la parole de l'imam Junaïd, soit une miséricorde pour les autres, même si Dieu a fait de toi une épreuve pour toi-même. Que Dieu nous donne la force et l'endurance pour être les acteurs de ce changement et les ambassadeurs de sa miséricorde. Nous prions Dieu qu'il délivre et soulage l'humanité de cette pandémie et qu'il vous donne à toutes et à tous une bonne santé ainsi que l'épanouissement intérieur et extérieur. Que Dieu vous bénisse. Je vous remercie. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I would like to give you a summary of my speech in English. The peace of Sufism and its values of spiritual education and managing moments of crisis. Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace be upon you. I am honored to join you tonight for this evening of dialogue, reflection, and remembrance of God. I want to thank everyone for your precious efforts to organize this event to talk about the importance of spirituality and Sufism in times of crisis. We are facing many crises, sanitary, environmental, social, and political. More than ever, we need united response for all humanity. We must admit the failure of civilization model based of material gain, accumulation of wealth and individualism. To solve this deep crisis, we need to base our governance on positive and universal noble values. Those spiritual and ethical values are the heart of the Sufi education, which is the universal treasure of humanity. Sufism is the heart of Islam, the station of excellence and purification of the heart. As the Prophet of Islam, the peace be upon him, said, if the heart is healthy, the whole body is healthy. Love for others, respect for difference, non-judgment, a sense of service, self-giving are all essential, universal, and human values in Sufi education. Sufism educates us to cultivate an active spirituality and develop wisdom to see opportunities in difficult times, as mentioned in the Quran verse. With every difficulty, there is relief. Sufism teaches us with every difficulty, there is an opportunity to look back on the most essential things in our existence, starting with our relationship to God, with others, and to ourselves. With Sufism, we find access to divine source on energy and the light. In this sense, according to one Sufi saying, the exterior reflects the state of the interior. Sufi education educates the soul and calms the heart. It allows us to be active citizens and to useful to others. The current crisis offers us the opportunity of spirituality, renewal, and self-improvement. The quest for noble behavior is fruit of Sufi education, which also becomes a way of celebrating the divine and opening up to others with solidarity, peace, and harmony. By transmitting a culture of love, mercy, and solidarity, the spiritual teaching of Sufism helps us transform ourselves and our societies with human universal values. May God protect us from every crisis, illuminate our hearts and souls. We wish you all an excellent, blessed night. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, mashallah. What a beautiful insight and keynote speech from our Sidi Munir. As always, your knowledge and insight is more than welcome. Amazing. Jazakallah khair. I'd now like to introduce a dialogue between Dr. Aida Abril Susiros Medina, Doctor of Psychology from Mexico, who on behalf of Bridging Spiritual Cultures will be interviewing Mr. Anawi Olivias, acupuncturist and representative of an interfaith charity, Adlil from Barcelona, Spain, talking about the impact of COVID-19 on the spiritual practices and communities.
Assalamu alaikum a todos y a todas. Buenas noches, Europa. Buenos días, América. Gracias por permitirnos entrar a sus hogares y compartir con ustedes la experiencia de vida durante esta pandemia de un hermano musulmán sufi que vive en España. Él es Arnau Oliveres, ejerce la acupuntura en la región de Cataluña, al norte de España. Trabaja además en una organización no gubernamental llamada AUDIR, creada para fomentar el diálogo interreligioso. Assalamu alaikum, Sidi Arnau. Gracias por aceptar nuestra invitación.
Wa alaikum assalam. Muchísimas gracias, Abril. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Bismillah. Un poquito para contextualizar brevemente lo que está sucediendo en España. Sabemos de antemano que tanto Francia como España son los dos países europeos que han sido afectados mayoritariamente por esta pandemia y que en España hasta la actualidad ha habido aproximadamente 3 millones de casos y hay más de 67,000 muertes hasta el día de hoy. En Cataluña, tu región es la segunda región de mayores casos y muertes después de Madrid. Por lo cual, ¿pudiera platicar un poco cuál ha sido la reacción en general de la gente en tu país sobre esta situación de pandemia?
Bueno, difícil pregunta me haces. Yo no me siento preparado para hacer un análisis. En todo caso, puedo aportar mi opinión, mi punto de vista, mi versión, mi vivencia de lo que está ocurriendo. No tengo del todo conocimiento de los datos cuantitativos concretos, exacto, van cambiando y entonces estoy en desconocimiento de esa realidad. En todo caso, sí que puedo decir que yo siempre he sido partidario en eso de la salud, de la prevención, de reforzar la energía de la vida. Eso quiere decir mantener un buen hábito de descanso y actividad, mantener un estilo de vida saludable, una dieta pues lo más sana posible, etc. Y una vez se han reforzado la salud en positivo, pues se puede atacar la enfermedad, digamos que en negativo, ¿no? Para reducir lo que nos perjudica, ¿no?
Claro.
Y entonces, por eso me disgusta un poco que las medidas o las propuestas que estén llegando sean de ese tipo, ¿no? De mascarilla, de distancia, que están bien, pero son, digamos, las negativas, y las constructivas, las que refuerzan,
Claro.
las que benefician el cuerpo, el estado de ánimo y el espíritu, a veces pues quedan relegadas a un segundo término, y es donde yo pondría el acento preeminente, ¿no? El
Claro.
cultivo de la salud como una disciplina, como un ejercicio espiritual, la belleza de la vida, la salud, la existencia es un don, es una revelación de la divinidad, es un bien que hay que cuidar, y esa fórmula positiva de cuidarlo creo que es donde yo pondría el acento.
Claro, tienes mucha razón, sí. Recientemente estaba leyendo un journal de psicología y educación y hablaba esta persona sobre las cuestiones positivas que ha traído esta pandemia. Una de ellas es el tomar conciencia del calentamiento global, el impacto de cómo es que debemos de mejorar nuestra alimentación. Lo que tú dices ciertamente sobre la higiene, la salud, cómo es que se ha reducido, por ejemplo, los accidentes y los crímenes, pero también es importante, según esta persona, de crear mejores relaciones, y ciertamente esta pandemia nos ha hecho a replantearnos nuestras prioridades, ¿no crees?
Interesante, sí, comparto esa reflexión. Sabemos que vivimos en un mundo en crisis, has hablado de esa crisis climática, hay una crisis ecológica, digamos que
Claro.
no tenemos el mundo lo suficientemente limpio como lo podríamos tener, ¿no? Un mundo sin humanos era más verde y un mundo con humanos es más gris. Vamos asfaltando, vamos construyendo, y podemos construir, naturalmente, cada criatura necesita construir su casa para vivir confortablemente,
Claro.
pero eso puede hacerse de manera sostenible o no sostenible, ¿no? Y aquí es donde tenemos una primera crisis. Tenemos una segunda crisis en la interrelación, en las transacciones económicas. Digamos que el dinero es una energía que circula, como la sangre circula por nuestro cuerpo y tiene que hidratar cada rincón de nuestro cuerpo, el dinero tiene que fluir para alimentar todas las bocas que quieren comer en ese planeta, ¿no? Y por desgracia el dinero se acumula en una parte y se echa a faltar en otra parte. Entonces, regular los mecanismos para que haya un poco más de justicia, y entender que la comunidad humana o la comunidad de seres vivientes estamos interrelacionados, ¿no? Y que el bien de uno pasa por el bien común. Uno no puede ser feliz, no puede estar sano en un mundo enfermo, ¿no? Entonces, yo creo que esas crisis nos están hablando más bien de una crisis de valores, ¿no? De una falta de unos principios éticos, y a lo mejor es falta de un reconocimiento espiritual, y falta entender que todos estamos enraizados en unas raíces compartidas, ¿no? Todos somos como ramas, todos somos como flores, cada uno con sus colores, cada uno con sus formas diferentes, pero esa diversidad bebe de una fuente común, se enraiza en unos principios vivificadores compartidos, y todos somos ese fruto de esa fuerza que nos da vida, ¿no? Entonces, si compartimos ese valor, ese respeto hacia esa fuente, y compartimos esos valores éticos, conviviremos mejor entre nosotros y con la naturaleza, ¿no? Entre las personas y con la naturaleza. Yo creo que esa lección la hemos ido aprendiendo a lo largo de todo el siglo XX, bueno, desde que yo estoy vivo, pues esto son valores que muchos movimientos han ido reivindicando,
Claro.
¿no? Pidiendo paz, pidiendo justicia, pidiendo igualdad, pidiendo respeto al medio ambiente. Y ahora parece que, bueno, pues ha sido con la excusa de esa pandemia, pues bueno, no hay mal que por bien no venga. Finalmente ahora podemos emprender un estilo de vida sostenible y respetuoso, y a lo mejor podemos aprovechar esa oportunidad, pero digamos que motivos para parar el mundo los ha habido, ¿no? Ha habido mucha pobreza, muchas guerras, malnutrición, muchas injusticias tan dañinas como esa pandemia y
Claro.
parecíamos descuidarlo, ¿no? Menos mal que ahora podemos aprovechar una oportunidad para replantear cosas y a lo mejor, pues entre todos construir algo que está por llegar y por lo tanto no podemos saber en qué dirección viene, ¿no? Pero podemos reorganizarnos y plantear opciones interesantes pensando en el bien común.
Así es. Respecto a los sentimientos, sí, es algo, tienes mucha razón cuando dices que sería difícil captar cuál es la situación emocional de la gente en general, pero al menos de tu grupo cercano, tus amigos, tus pacientes, tus colegas, ¿qué tipo de sentimientos has observado tú? ¿Qué cambios has identificado?
Pues reacciones ambivalentes, unas de las cuales tienden al miedo, tienden a la obsesión, tienden a lo que podríamos llamar cerrarse, encerrarse, asustarse, juzgar o sospechar del otro, y hay ese cierre y eso pues conlleva un miedo, una inseguridad. Por otro lado, he visto también mucha gente que por lo contrario está viviendo una apertura, un acercamiento, ¿no? A lo mejor no vecinal o de proximidad física, porque tenemos que mantener unas distancias de seguridad para prevenir, pero, por ejemplo, esa charla que estamos manteniendo tú desde París y yo desde Cataluña, pues yo creo que es un encuentro fértil, fructífero, que puede dar frutos interesantes, y esto sí que nos habla de esa apertura, ¿no? Yo creo que es interesante verlo. Todos tenemos derecho a encerrarnos, a tener miedo, a un poco volver a un espacio privado, de intimidad, para cultivarnos, para aceptarnos a nosotros mismos, pero no podemos quedarnos en ese distanciamiento de los demás, sino que tenemos que también abrirnos a todos y entender que sobre todo creo que lo que tenemos que combatir un poco es esa banalización, ¿no? que es yo creo la crisis de valores de la que hablaba, esa banalización que vemos que el mundo está en crisis y nos pensamos que arreglarlo es quedarnos en el sofá de nuestras casas viendo series o películas o jugando con el ordenador o perdiendo el tiempo en las redes sociales, ¿no? Evidentemente tenemos derecho a hacer esas cosas en nuestro tiempo libre, pero cambiar el mundo y mejorarlo será construir relaciones de dignidad con las otras personas, no aislarnos del mundo, ¿no? Solo
Claro.
la parte de quedarnos en el sofá no es salvar el mundo, hay gente que lo vende así, no es suficiente, hay que construir algo en equipo con las otras personas. Inshallah.
Y en ese sentido, Sidi, sí me gustaría que nos compartieras qué has hecho tú. ¿Qué has hecho tú para salir adelante ante esta situación? Y estamos hablando de este año, ¿ha habido cambios en tu persona? ¿Qué te ha fortalecido?
Muchísimos cambios. Interesante esa pregunta que haces, muy íntima y no sé si la sabré responder, pero por suerte los que estamos en una vía sufí disponemos de unas herramientas que podríamos sintetizar con el nombre de dhikr, ¿no? Que es el recuerdo de Dios, la invocación de Dios, y ese recuerdo lo que nos hace justamente es enraizarnos en esa fuente de la realidad de la que hablábamos, ¿no? Una fuerza dadora de vida, sustentadora de la vida, ¿no? Entonces, eso aporta confianza. Cuando uno puede tener miedo o no tiene una sensación de incertidumbre a dónde va a avanzar toda la situación laboral que está cambiando, la situación con los familiares, ¿no? La vida cultural queda un poco interrumpida, muchas cosas están cambiando, no sabemos qué forma tomará el mundo, pero sí sabemos de dónde venimos y a dónde vamos en última instancia, ¿no? La fuente de donde surgimos es el mar que nos recoge, y entonces somos como un río en movimiento constante, en cambio constante, pero si tenemos la certeza de que esa fuente nos está dando vida constantemente y nos está empujando y dirigiendo y que ella es consciente de lo que va pasando y sabe que nos lleva al mar, porque las aguas retornan al mar, entonces, pues bueno, como agua que somos, ¿no? Podemos improvisar un poco, ver si vamos a la derecha, a la izquierda, en función del terreno por el que cruzamos tendremos que gestionar. Nosotros somos embajadores y sobre el terreno tenemos que decidir si vamos a la derecha, si vamos a la izquierda, si queremos compartir o si queremos ser egoístas, ¿no? Y aquí están nuestras decisiones, pero digamos que el dhikr, esas prácticas espirituales que nos ofrece el método sufí, por decirlo de una manera práctica, son herramientas que nos permiten confiar, tener confianza en que todo es para bien, todo es un aprendizaje y nos da mucha fuerza para hacerlo, aunque tengamos miedos, aunque tengamos dudas, aunque tengamos contradicciones internas. A pesar de eso, subyace esa fuerza, esa confianza, esa energía creadora y confiamos en ella.
Sí. Ha cambiado nuestra forma de acercarnos, como tú bien lo dices, a través de sesiones online. ¿Qué te ha parecido a ti este tipo de reuniones? Platícanos un poquito más sobre eso, Sidi.
Pues sí, hace ya un año que todo eso ha empezado. Estamos celebrando el primer aniversario de esa situación de pandemia o de confinamiento, de epidemia, como se tenga que llamar. Y una de las cosas que me gustó fue recibir un dhikr, una invocación con el nombre divino Ya Mukti. Ya Mukti es el originador, el que inicia algo, el que produce algo nuevo, ¿no? Entonces me sentí muy partícipe al poder recitar ese nombre divino repetidamente, me sentí muy partícipe de lo que estaban haciendo y me puse a disposición para colaborar con lo que tenga que surgir, sin saber muy bien qué será, pero confiando que será interesante, necesario y entendiendo que algo va a cambiar, ¿no? Y creo que eso es compartido. Muchas personas musulmanes y no musulmanes se han unido a esa manera de entenderlo y han iniciado también dentro de su interioridad y en su manera de hacer. Yo creo que han incorporado esa práctica, esos encuentros online de dhikr, están atrayendo a gente nueva que quiere conocerlo y quiere saborear el dhikr, quiere practicarlo. Entonces, por una parte, pues perdemos a lo mejor la fuerza que tiene la presencia física de los compañeros, que es importante y se les echa mucho en falta, y hay que decirlo desde aquí, pues me rodea una soledad que, bueno, tiene su parte triste, ¿no? Porque poder estar en persona con los hermanos es impagable, no tiene precio, pero sin embargo estamos entrando en casas de gente que vive muy alejada, gente que vive muy lejos de nosotros y que está teniendo la oportunidad de entenderse, ¿no? Entonces no podemos abrazarnos físicamente, pero nuestros corazones se están abrazando y estamos intercambiando palabras, miradas, y el intercambio sigue siendo posible y enriquecedor, y está permitiendo pues participación de gente que no había estado en contacto con el sufismo, pues lo encuentra dentro de sus propias casas, o sea, más fácil, imposible. Está habiendo también mucha facilidad, no hay dificultad que no venga con facilidad, ¿no?
Así es.
Nuestro querido Alcorán.
Finalmente, Sidi, dime, ¿qué nos pudieras compartir para la audiencia que nos escucha y ve como consejo, como sugerencia ante esta situación que estamos viviendo?
Mira, se me ocurren dos cosas. Una, a lo mejor, de punto de vista, ¿no? De entender que todo está siendo una revelación de la divinidad, ¿no? En todas las cosas intuimos esa fuerza que las hace posibles, ¿no? Como dice el Corán, miramos al este, miramos al oeste, siempre veremos la faz de Dios, ¿no? A la cual no podemos asimilar esas cosas porque las cosas pasarán de largo y acabarán su existencia, pero la fuerza dadora de su existencia no. Entonces, lo que tenemos que ver en las cosas no es la propia cosa, sino la fuerza que la hace posible, ¿no? Entonces, eso es puede ser interesante para desarraigarse un poco de las situaciones en las que estamos, que pueden ser desagradables, pueden ser dolorosas, pueden no gustarnos, pero si tenemos esa perspectiva entendemos que lo que nos ocurre, pues bueno, no es permanente, será cambiante y una situación difícil puede traer luego a continuación una situación bonita. Y al final lo bonito de la vida es eso, no es que sea bonito todo lo que ocurre en ella, sino que el hecho de que ocurra la vida es bonito, ¿no?
Claro.
Es el hecho de estar viviendo el que nos hace feliz, aunque no todos los momentos lo hayan sido, ¿no? Yo, por ejemplo, la otra cosa que podría aportar es de nivel personal y familiar, ¿no? En ese momento estoy acompañando a mi padre que está viviendo la última etapa de su vida, ¿no? Le han diagnosticado un cáncer terminal en el páncreas bastante avanzado, tiene un pronóstico desfavorable, una esperanza de vida breve, pero bonita, sin embargo. Está asumiendo que sus días aquí con nosotros se acaban y se ha dispuesto a ser feliz, a entregarse a vivirlos, estar lo máximo posible con las personas que le quieren y a los que él quiere, y es realmente feliz, ¿no?
Claro.
Pudo tener unas semanas de miedo, de dudas, porque no tenía el diagnóstico, porque no encontraban un tratamiento paliativo para sus dolores, estaba anémico, estaba fuerte, bajo de energía, pero han conseguido que tenga más fuerza, que tenga más hierro en la sangre, más energía vital, han paliado bien sus dolores y entonces puede ser feliz, ¿no? Entonces la enfermedad puede ser un inconveniente, puede ser una dificultad, pero no es un impedimento para agradecer la vida, ¿no? Y él está confiado en que está pasando lo que tiene que pasar y yo soy feliz aprendiendo esa lección de él, ¿no? Ver su entereza, ver su dignidad, y cuando llegue el día llegará, y mientras tanto disfrutar, porque eso es un milagro, ¿no? El que estemos vivos es un hecho
Claro.
maravilloso y tenemos que agradecerlo cada día. Y eso es una lección para fijarnos en las cosas importantes, ¿no? En mi caso, pues en el caso de mi familia es por un cáncer, en otros casos puede ser ese COVID, pero también, bueno, ha habido gente con millones de problemas diferentes, porque enfermedades no nos las acabamos y de problemas hay de diferentes tipos, pero siempre puede haber una dignidad, una alegría de vivir, un reconocimiento, unas ganas de compartir, un agradecimiento del hecho de la vida que yo creo que da más fuerza que cualquier cosa que nos quite. Cualquier energía que nos quite la motivación, no, siempre hay esperanza, ¿no? Porque
Claro.
eso es la entrega, ¿no? Que significa el Islam, ¿no? La
La
entrega
sumisión.
a la divinidad, la sumisión, ¿no? A asimilar la realidad como es y entregarse a que sea como es,
Así
confiando en
es.
Dios.
Así es, y verdaderamente ese testimonio que nos acabas de dar nos da un ejemplo vivo de alguien que está en paz, de alguien que está bendecido y sobre todo, como tú bien dices, ver la vida desde otra perspectiva porque tienes la fortaleza interior y la seguridad, qué es lo que va a pasar después. Muy hermoso tu testimonio, Sidi. Te agradezco mucho que nos hayas permitido estar en tu hogar, en tu vida, en tu intimidad, y las bendiciones de Dios para ti, para tu familia, Sidi, para tu papá. Y para todos ustedes, auditorio, muchísimas gracias por compartir con nosotros esta experiencia y esperemos verlos pronto. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Muchísimas gracias a ti por esas preguntas tan interesantes que profundizan tanto, aunque en ese breve espacio de tiempo apuntan a una dirección de mucha profundidad. Te agradezco que hayas contado conmigo para responderlas, pero estoy seguro que esa profundidad está en el oyente, en el espectador de esa conversación, porque él tiene sus vivencias y entonces es un placer compartir las mías, pero sobre todo lo que es un placer es que estéis organizando eso, que estáis permitiendo que la gente pueda preguntarse esas preguntas a sí mismo, y eso es lo que tiene valor de esa charla.
Muchísimas gracias, Sidi. Gracias a todos. Buenas noches y buenos días. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Many thanks to Dr. Aida Abril Salcedo Medina from Mexico and Sidi Arnaud Oliveros from Barcelona for that very rich and insightful dialogue. As you explained so well, the value of spiritual practice in times of restriction and confinement has become clearer as a means of benefit and relief in this time. As with many spiritual traditions, part of the practice of Sufism is to share songs and poems of spiritual orientation and instruction in the path of divine knowledge and experience. I'm very glad to introduce the first of this evening's beautiful sessions of spiritual song. The aim is to enable the listener to be transported from what may be our everyday, familiar state to different, deeper states of awareness of the beauty of creation and reality. To give a flavour of this, here is a translation of a few lines of one of the poems we are about to share. I looked and could not see other than you to love. There is nothing in reality except for God. If it weren't for you, the delight of love would not even be pleasing to the lover. I threw off all pretense in your love, and whoever is unrestrained by love, his secret is intimacy with the divine. And I tore off the garments of dignity without any shame for you alone, and the trial in your love became a delight. There's no complaint in love, even if my insides are torn apart. It would truly be a shame for the lover to complain of your love.
عليك وطابت في محبتك البلوى فما في الهوى الشكوى ولو مزق الحشا فما في الهوى الشكوى ولو مزق الحشا الشكوى وعار على العشاق في حبك الشكوى كنت قبل اليوم مذنى كنت قبل اليوم مذنى بالنوى والبين بالنوى والبين دائما أحزاني لما دائما أحزاني لما دائما أحزاني لما جن ليل الآن جن ليل الآن فانجلى ليلي وفجري فانجلى ليلي وفجري فانجلى ليلي وفجري لاح لي العينان لاح لي العينان لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله رحمة ربي موجودة أحب لقاء الأحباب في كل ساعة لأن لقاء الأحباب فيه المنافع لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله رحمة ربي موجودة فيا قرة الأعين تالله إنني على عهدكم باقي وفي الوصل ضامع لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله رحمة ربي موجودة لقد نبتت في القلب منكم محبة كما نبتت في الراحتين الأصابع لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله رحمة ربي موجودة نوت من حي ليلى لما سمعت نداء يا له من صوتي حلو أود لا يتناهى ردت عيني جذبتني أدخلتني لحماها نوت من حي ليلى لما سمعت نداها يا له من صوتي يحلو أود لا يتناهى الله 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 يا مولانا الله 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 ذلك الفضل من الله رادت عني جذبتني أدخلتني لحماها أسدتني خطبتني أجلست هاتني بجناها الله 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 يا مولانا الله 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 ذلك الفضل من الله أدهشتني تيهتني حيرتني في بهاها أخذتني ملكتني غيبتني في مناها الله 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 يا مولانا الله 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 ذلك الفضل من الله.
MashaAllah, thank you so much. That was the London Qaside group from the English countryside, and an amazing Qaside that was recited. I'm sure everybody on the program enjoyed those. Thank you for that. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, who is Maha Maharaj. She is a consultant and senior expert in international development. She has worked on peace and security and poverty eradication projects across the world for the United Nations in the past, particularly in Asia and in Africa. She comes from Hadramaut in Yemen. She's married and lives with her family in Houston, Texas, United States of America. She is honored to be asked by Sidi Manir Al-Qadri Al-Bashishi to contribute her thoughts and professional experiences to this evening's event. She will be talking about the impact of COVID in the United States of America and reflections on the spiritual aspects of the crisis. Maha.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, I'm honored to be with you today. I was asked to share a few of my personal reflections about the universal nature of spirituality during times of crises. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to be sharing strictly personal reflections and not a scholarly or an academic or a philosophical lecture. I hope you find it useful. Before I begin, I will first introduce myself. My name is Maha Maharaj and I live in Houston, Texas. I worked for the United Nations for many, many years, and my work took me to the four corners of the world, where I worked actually with communities and people from diverse racial and religious backgrounds. One of the striking features of the Buchishi Tariqa is that it is deeply rooted in the Moroccan Sufi tradition. At the same time, its followers come from Morocco, but also from the world. So there are American Buchishis, European Buchishis, Asian and African Buchishis, and I think that is beautiful. Dear brothers and sisters, we all know how much suffering the global pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, has caused throughout the world. Millions of people have suffered. Many have died. Millions have died. Many have lost jobs, regardless of their economic background or of their racial or religious affiliation. In fact, everyone in the world was impacted directly or indirectly. In order to limit the spread of the virus, we were all asked to observe the requirement of physical distancing, of wearing masks, and limiting the numbers of people in closed spaces. And this has had a huge impact on everything that we do in our respective towns and cities. Businesses closed, transportation declined, food became scarce for some. Mosques, churches, synagogues remained empty and closed. So, in order to continue working and socializing and worshiping, we all met online. The exponential rise of the use of applications such as Zoom for work, professional use as well as personal use, has actually created a new way that will remain with us even after the pandemic ends. Dear brothers and sisters, plagues, disease, famine is not new for mankind. In fact, it has been a hard reality, a very hard reality of the world that we have lived in throughout history. We all have heard of the Spanish flu in 1918. There was the London plague, the Ebola, HIV/AIDS, many epidemics and many diseases, and outbreak of diseases has occurred. We all know, however, that the COVID-19 pandemic is a pandemic, which means the whole world, and it's not just one country or one continent. It's therefore a lot more challenging for everyone. Times like these remind us that we are fragile and that we are mortal, and that we live in an imperfect world. And times like these, in fact, inspire us to become more compassionate and to show more love, more concern for one another, and to be non-judgmental, to accept everyone regardless of what they believe in and where they come from. Since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic last year, we all know about the selflessness and the sacrifice of doctors and nurses. They have actually put their lives at risk to care for the sick. And many people have volunteered within their communities, at food banks, for instance, food banks and in other places, simply to reach out. So the pandemic has generally not made people stay within their communities. It has actually made people reach out to outside the boundaries of their own communities. And this inspiration comes from one's faith, regardless if it's Islam or Christianity or Judaism or even Buddhism or Hinduism. We as humans have proven throughout history that we can resort to higher principles and values that help us understand and navigate through difficulties and hardships. Our individual and collective response throughout crises reflects where we place our hopes, and more importantly, it reflects the strength of our faith. According to the Pew Research Center, during COVID-19 crisis in America, very few Americans said that their houses of worship were open, but 24% of Americans said that their faith actually became stronger. 57% of American adults who attended religious services before the pandemic reported that after the pandemic and during the pandemic, they regularly attend religious services online or on television. Many of us who have a religious belief system, a faith system, have resorted to it during this crisis to provide us with strength, and comfort and resilience. So Muslims, Christians, and Jews, in fact, instead of believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that God has, instead of believing only that God has sent the coronavirus to punish us, we believe, we emphasize, all these religions have emphasized the importance of showing empathy and kindness and practicing love thy neighbor and being generous with one's time and money. As people of faith, Muslims are grounded in the belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us when we are in trouble. We are required to pray and to supplicate for ourselves and for others. Islam, Christianity, and Judaism have all provided their respective followers with practical advice and with medically sound advice, which is to observe the lockdowns and abide by all public health requirements. As Muslims, we often refer to the hadith of our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. In fact, not just Muslims. I have read and seen and heard non-Muslims refer to this hadith narrated by Sahih Muslim and Bukhari. Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ said, when you hear that a plague is in a land, do not go to it. And if it occurs in a land that you are already in, then do not leave it. This hadith highlights the importance that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ placed on individual and on public health. As the pandemic quickly started to claim more lives early on in 2020, most governments in the Islamic world and most governments in the non-Islamic world took time to explain the importance of public health measures to its citizens and to its business communities, to the spiritual and religious leaders. So the enforcement of strict stay-at-home measures to slow down the spread of virus has meant that for millions of Muslims, in-person Friday prayers were cancelled, Umrah and Hajj was stopped, and Ramadan of 2020 started and ended without Taraweeh prayers in mosques. Our spirituality and faith during times such as COVID-19 dictates that as Muslims, we should not wish for death. Instead, we must do our best to remain healthy and to survive. We are urged in Islam to pray for our health, for our well-being, and for a good fate. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, none of you should wish for death due to a calamity that has afflicted him. Yet, if he or she must do something, let him say, "Oh Allah, keep me alive so long as life is good for me, and cause me to die if death is good for me, is better for me." This hadith is narrated by Sahih Muslim and Bukhari. Dear brothers and sisters, during my professional career, I have had the privilege of working directly with many communities, with governments at the highest level, but also with communities directly. And when there is a crisis and when we're supposed to develop a program to help a community address a crisis, one of the features of supporting and helping that community is to listen to them and to understand what are the sources that give them strength and that give them hope. And in all cases, whether it's a community in a remote village or area in the Philippines where for example, a volcano erupted, or a community in Syria outside Hama where a dam erupted and flooded the communities, where in both cases, and many other examples where a crisis, a natural crisis, or sometimes a man-made crisis causes hardship, people are affected. And the source of strength of all of these communities comes from their faith system. In fact, we found out that for those people who have a faith system, help is easy, much easier than helping communities that do not belong to a strong faith, regardless of that faith. We have found that those communities that are that listen and practice their faith, that their faith tells them, helps them to navigate through that hardship that they're going through. It gives them comfort that this hardship is a temporary one, and they're required to be patient and to accept and to move on. They're also required to help each other. And I have observed that directly. I've seen that people do come together, and that people who have a faith, who believe in a faith, regardless of what it is, come together, pull together as a community faster and help one another, and emerge much more in a much better place than they were, sometimes even before the crisis. In the Buchishi Tariqa, Sidi Jamal has provided special adhkar to help the fuqara during times of uncertainty and hardship. For example, in Dhikr al-Faraj, it starts with the repetition of one ayah. وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. The ayah actually starts with وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات, and it ends with وَبَشِّرْ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah says that I will test you. I will test all human beings. There will be tribulations. However, it is those who accept, who are patient, and who accept this tribulation are the ones who will emerge with spiritual benefit, with rewards. And that, the repetition of this ayah, provides the fuqara in the Buchishi Tariqa solace. It provides them comfort that this is a test, but it will pass, it will come to an end, and the end and the rewards come for those who are patient, who are sabirin. That this dhikr deepens and awakens our spirits to the blessings that one can receive as a result of the trials that one is enduring. Dear brothers and sisters, I will end my reflections here. I hope you found them useful, and thank you for listening to me. May Allah bless you and your families. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Many thanks to Lila Maha Maharaj from Houston, Texas, for those very pertinent thoughts and reflections on the nature of this crisis and its impact on diverse communities in the USA and across the world. I would now like to introduce our next dialogue, led by Mr. Tamir Mahmood, who is Deputy Head Academic at a North London school. He will be interviewing Father Damien Howard, the Provincial Superior of Jesuits in Britain, from the Society of Jesus in the Catholic Church, and sharing perspectives on the COVID-19 crisis in the UK.
Thank you for joining us for this dialogue as part of Spirituality in the Times of COVID-19 with the Bridging Spiritual Cultures charity in the UK. My name is Tamir Mahmood, and I'm blessed to be involved in some of the work of Bridging Spiritual Cultures in the UK. And I'm delighted and blessed to be joined by Father Damien Howard today, the Provincial Superior of the Jesuits in Britain. So Father Damien, welcome and thank you.
Good. Great to be with you.
Thank you. To begin, could you tell us a little something about your work and the work of the Jesuits, please?
Sure. So the Society of Jesus, that's the full name, is a religious order in the Catholic Church, a religious order of men, brothers and priests. We're about 15,000 throughout the world. Here in Britain, we're about 120. We aged all the way from 25 to 95, involved in all sorts of different work. So here in London, we've got a refugee service, we've got a missions office which helps Jesuits in foreign countries. We run 3 parishes, one of them here in the centre of London, one in Southall, very heavily South Asian parish, and one in Stamford Hill in North London, a very Jewish area with quite a large Muslim population. So we tend to gravitate towards places of intercultural encounter. We love interreligious dialogue and dialoguing with cultures in general. So that's something that we tend to do. What else can I say? We're involved in education, higher education, and social work of various sorts. But the most important thing is our spirituality. We were founded by a man called St. Ignatius of Loyola, who is a Basque, a Spaniard, and who formulated his own sort of spirituality in the Christian tradition. For Sufis, maybe it's not too difficult to understand what that is. So a series of spiritual practices, ways of praying, relationship with the director, that sort of thing, which helps spiritual growth, integration of the person and growth towards God. So that's what I do.
Thank you. And I think, as you say, there is a lot of commonality in the practices and in the sort of approach of Sufism and of your own practice. So there would be a lot to explore there as well in terms of.
There would indeed, yes, a rich scene.
And we're here today to talk more precisely about spirituality in the times of COVID. So just to begin reflecting at a personal level, if you think back to the beginning of the pandemic, almost a year ago exactly now, how have your own emotional and spiritual responses developed or changed over that time?
Well, it's interesting you asked that. I've been thinking a little bit about the year, because now that we've got an anniversary to celebrate, you look over the course of a year, and in some ways, you know, the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, he gives you a retreat over 30 days in silence. And in some ways, I've noticed commonalities of that dynamic, of that pattern with what I've been through. So you start with a sort of, to be honest, there was something a bit exhilarating at the beginning of lockdown. And I remember that. So there's something dramatic about it. You felt that something big was happening in world history, and we were all in it together in a strange way, in a way that was quite new, feeling of a great crisis that was upon us. And there is a buzz about that, whatever you feel about that nevertheless was part of it. And of course, we had that astonishingly beautiful weather. It just seemed to be day upon day of beautiful blue sky and sunshine. And people getting in touch with nature in a new way and discovering birdsong because the aeroplanes weren't masking the natural sounds. So there was something actually quite enchanting about the initial experience, getting in touch with a sense of goodness. And I didn't find it difficult to find God in that. God speaking through his creation to us in the way that God does. Then that strange sense that this was not just a nice experience for people who were living in nice parts of the city, but actually people were struggling, people were getting sick, and people were dying. And there's a certain, I suppose because I was quite distant from that, and because the suffering was largely invisible, we didn't see it on television. It was something we were protected from. So a strange sense of being connected to something painful, some kind of suffering going on, but but not seeing it and not experiencing it myself. Again, there's a spiritual significance to that often the sin that we are implicated in doesn't touch us directly. We don't necessarily suffer the consequences of it, but we sense a connection there, and that's troubling. And I think that troubled me quite a lot. We had the experience of not being able to open churches. So I live right next to a big city centre church where we usually welcome hundreds of people every day for celebration of Mass. And so to see that closed and see it not available to people, and then when it was available, only a few able to come, really, to take the risk of coming into town. Again, that was troubling. I was very lucky every day to be able to say Mass and to be able to take part in the liturgy of the church. And that was, for me, very powerful. And then the live streaming of that, which kicked in quite quickly, I felt very ambiguous about that. But in a strange way, it started to connect me in different ways, new ways to people. So I would celebrate Mass, I'd give a homily, and then somebody would text me, having just heard it, someone I haven't heard from for a long time. Sometimes it was positive feedback, not always. And that sense of the church being a larger sort of network of human beings was a beautiful one.
Yes, and that leads very nicely to the next reflection is what were those main spiritual aids or resources, if you like, that helped you through those more difficult times, or as you say, to come to accept them and maybe even to learn from them and grow from them?
What were the spiritual resources that helped me? Well, faith was really important. I think I discovered a greater sense of faith in the middle of it all. I think it is because you have to ask questions about hope. You have to ask where your hope is in all this. What is it I want to get back to? What is it that's really important at this time? And you start to notice that there were quite a lot of banal, superficial things that kept you going. The expectation of seeing this person or having that experience or having a day off, going to the seaside, whatever it is for you, and you think, okay, I can probably do without those things. But when I do, what's left? What's the bedrock? What's really important? And I suppose for a person of faith, what tends to come out in some way is God, connection with God, trying to serve God, trying to sense God's presence, finding God in this experience. And that's ultimately, it's not a challenge because it's not about working hard, it's about being open. It's about, as you say, you use the word to accept, and it's a crucial one, isn't it? If we can actually just accept where we are rather than fight against it, then God floods in, and we discover that this is a place of encounter, a place of intimacy with the Lord, and that's everything, isn't it? And it relativizes all the difficulties and all the frustrations. So I have prayed, not as much as I would like. Catholics tend to say that, how are you praying? Well, not as much as I'd like. And it's been really easy when I have done, and it's been really important. And God is there, and there's a deep sense of joy in the middle of all this, which is remarkable, a deep sense that it's going to be okay. And I suppose that's what a lot of my faith is about.
Thank you. And you've already alluded to how your own work and connections with the community and beyond has evolved and started to change. So maybe we can explore that in a little bit more detail. So how have you transitioned your spiritual, your pastoral work to the online space, for example?
Right. Well, a lot of what we do is what we call retreats. I mean, you'll recognize that word. I know, but a lot of Christians wouldn't necessarily know what a retreat is. So a retreat tends to be a period of time when you often go off to a house in the countryside, away from it all, and give time to prayer and reflection in a particular sort of tradition or way. That's the bedrock of what we do as Jesuits. We have a beautiful retreat house in North Wales, which I hope you'll see one day, a place called St. Binos. We've got various other spirituality centres, all of which help people to connect with God and to find God in their story and in their lives, in ways that you would recognise probably quite familiarly. They have all moved online. I mean, they've all found ways of connecting with people online. We use the word spiritual directive in the Christian world to talk about that sort of that spiritual guide, the person who is able to listen and work out a little bit what God is doing in your life and to help you to cooperate with God and to go deeper. So I think we've always thought, well, that's only a relationship that can take place in, one-to-one in a room, because only in that context can I read your body language and really sense what's going on for you and really connect with you. And so we've always resisted doing retreats on Skype or let alone Teams or Zoom. And I think what's happened is we've been just forced into this new technology, and we've discovered that it's perfectly all right.
The next question really follows on from what you mentioned there at the end, in terms of people perhaps looking for different things. Have you noticed with the people that you worked with, and you mentioned some people that you might have never met in a physical sense in real life before, that people are searching for something different now? They're looking for something different from the spirituality they seek from you or through you?
I don't think they're looking for something different, because I think people are always looking for the same thing. They're always looking for God. They're always looking for that experience of encounter with the divine. I don't think that's different. I think some people are doing that who weren't doing it before. I do think that's the case. I think some people have started to look at their lives in a different way. An awful lot of the way our society worked before the lockdown was the sort of the frantic pace of life. I live in the centre of London. It might be different if you're living in the countryside, I guess. But that sense of being in the rat race, being in a routine, being locked into various kind of compulsive patterns and habits. And when all of that's broken and interrupted, I think, first of all, there can be an experience of loss and even grief. But then people start to say, do I need that? Do I want that? Is that what it's all about? And we all know that that is not what our lives are about. And it takes quite a brave and open person to see that and to admit it in themselves. And, and I think some of those people who are brave and quite strong and resilient are asking questions now. What do I really want? They're not all sort of pouring into Catholic churches to get it has to be said, but I think there will be some who are looking for some kind of spiritual resource which they haven't before realized was important for them. Yeah.
I mean, we've certainly seen in our work in the UK that people have come looking for that spiritual connection where they wouldn't have prior to COVID. They've said very directly it's because of this experience of isolation and feeling cut off from their local communities that they've reached out into an online space, or they've looked to have a more direct spiritual connection because they're isolated. So we've sort of experienced that at a very micro scale.
Fantastic. That's really good. Yeah.
And just in terms of sort of drawing some of those themes into a wider level, and also drawing the dialogue to something of a close, how do you see the pandemic changing social and personal relationships in the longer term? Do you see that it will have a significant impact and redefine things, or do you sense that things might actually just revert to as they were before?
Yeah, I did a lot of speculating on the future in the first 2 months of this pandemic. A lot of us were sort of clutching for meaning and significance and trying to work out what it all meant. And then I just kind of gave up. People asked me to do talks about what this meant, and I just thought afterwards you just lose the desire to speculate too much. But it's a good question to ask now. I guess two things. One is to do with the weakening of society. I think it has been a social trauma, and it's left a lot of people feeling weak and fragile. And I think we're going to take a long time to get back to normal, whatever the new normal is. But there will be a new normal. I suppose the other bigger thing, though, are all these big issues that have come up during the pandemic. So I'm thinking of Black Lives Matter. I'm thinking of the new attention to violence against women in all its forms, to sort of issues of sexual orientation and trans rights and all those sorts of things which conservative people dismiss as woke, the woke agenda. I don't think one should dismiss these things at all. I think they're coming up at an important moment. Although I was initially very surprised when the Black Lives Matter thing kicked off in the middle of the pandemic. I was just thinking, what's the connection? And I think the connection is that an awful lot of people put a lot of energy into being patient, into putting up with situations, into tolerating moderate to significant injustices in their daily lives. Those take energy. And I think when you don't have much energy left, something snaps, something gives. You just can't do it anymore. I think that's the mechanism. I'm not sure, but I think people just say enough is enough. I'm not prepared to deal with this anymore. I think it's got to do with the exhaustion of the lockdown. Well, no doubt, as something like normality comes back, we will start again becoming a bit more patient and putting up with mediocre to bad behavior and the way we do. But I'm interested in the way that those fissures have opened up, because I think people who are spiritual ought to be very attentive to them, because it usually teaches us something about ourselves, our own implication in those issues. It usually points to, especially if you're a middle-aged man like I am, middle-aged white man, a sort of the violence and the roughness and the sexism and all the other things that one participates in without seeing it or knowing it. And I think if you're a spiritual person, you want to know about that. It's not easy to confront those things, but I think to have them shown up and to want to deal with them. And of course, behind them is probably the biggest one of them all is what we're doing to the planet, which we don't see in moral terms usually, but there's a huge wake-up call for us to recognize that as a real spiritual issue for us to try and deal with. So I think those are the things I regard as really important. The nastiness and the roughness and the violence that's around will continue, won't it? I mean, that hasn't gone anywhere. In some ways, it might be even more vicious than before, because the pandemic has weakened us. But I think we've just got to hope in God and hope in the way that these new awarenesses, these new lights might lead us into something better. And it won't be utopia. I don't believe in great revolutions in which everything turns out all right. But it will lead us to something good.
I think that's a beautiful place to end, and to thank you for your reflections and sharing your experiences. And as ever, I've always benefited from your presence and your insights. And it's we came into our contact through searching, through my searching, and also through your searching. I think all of these spiritual dialogues are about all our own journeys of searching, and it's been a wonderful relationship for me, and this is another example of that. So thank you so much.
You're very kind, and it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for your
so much, Damien. With peace. Thank you.
Peace be with you. God bless. Bye.
Many thanks to Sidi Tamir Mahmood and Father Damien Howard for sharing your experiences and perspectives so openly. It is true that reflections from diverse spiritual traditions can help us to deepen each of our own understanding, and so thank you again for your generosity in sharing with us all in this way. The great Catholic theologian Pascal once said that all of humanity's problems derive from man's inability to sit silently in a room alone, which perhaps helps to shed light on the challenges we have all shared in the period of lockdown and with our practice. We also asked Father Damien if he could suggest some spiritual song in the Christian tradition to share for this evening. As in all spiritual traditions, in the Catholic tradition of choral music, there is an emphasis on the involvement of the entire community in singing and engaging in the sublime relationship with the divine through that expression. The piece that follows, by the English composer Thomas Tallis from the 16th century Christian era, is sung in Latin and entitled Spem in Alium. It is sung by 8 choirs of 5 voices each and beautifully arranged in this short video by young people from Australia. I shall read a short part of the English translation from the Latin. I have never put my hope in any other but Thee, God of the one who strives with Thee, who can show both wrath and graciousness, and who absolves all the sins of man in suffering. Lord God, Creator of heaven and earth, regard our humility.
Wow, thank you to the choral singers. MashaAllah, what a beautiful harmony of voices, and how lovely to see tranquility in the faces of all those young people. Well done. We are now moving on to introduce you to Dr. Mohammed Bahtat, physicist, lecturer at the University of France, speaking on spiritual confinement and relief. Reflections on the nature of retreat in times of pandemic with reference to the work of Ibn Arabi.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Louange à Dieu, prière et salut sur ses prophètes et messagers, particulièrement sur le plus noble d'entre eux, le prophète Sidna Mohammed, sur sa famille purifiée, sur ses nobles compagnons et sur ceux qui l'ont suivi sur la voie de l'excellence qu'il a tracée. Je citerai bien sûr particulièrement nos maîtres Sidi Hamza et Sidi Jamaldin, qu'Allah les agrée, et leur héritier désigné par la grâce, Moulay Mounir, qu'Allah soit satisfait de lui. La situation actuelle marquée par la pandémie du Covid-19 interpelle tous les hommes, particulièrement ceux qui ont reçu la grâce de la foi. Les mots-clés de cette crise qu'on entend à longueur de journée sur les chaînes d'information ont une résonance particulière chez les soufis. Confinement, déconfinement, fermeture, ouverture, distanciation ne sont pas des mots anodins. Ce sont des mots fondamentaux de la tradition islamique, comme de toute tradition, et qui sont de ce fait au cœur de la vie et de l'expérience spirituelle des gens de la voie. Je vais commencer par donner quelques repères coraniques, parce que mon propos peut paraître surprenant au premier abord. Je rappelle d'abord que le paradis et l'enfer, c'est une histoire de confinement et de déconfinement. C'est une histoire d'un confinement plus ou moins grand et d'un déconfinement plus ou moins grand selon les positions occupées dans l'un ou dans l'autre. إذا ألقوا منها مكانا ضيقا دعوا هنالك ثبورا لا تدعوا اليوم ثبورا واحدا وادعوا ثبورا كثيرا كلما أرادوا أن يخرجوا منها أعيدوا فيها. Le Coran nous décrit l'enfer comme un lieu d'enfermement, de confinement, de fermeture et de restriction. À l'inverse, le paradis est décrit par le Coran comme étant le déconfinement plus ou moins grand promis aux croyants. سارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض. Deuxième repère, c'est les deux histoires les plus récurrentes dans le texte coranique, qu'on retrouve à plusieurs reprises, et qui sont des histoires de confinement et de déconfinement. La première, c'est l'histoire de Sidna Adam, qui mange le fruit de l'arbre interdit, qui voit apparaître sa forme et qui descend dans le monde des formes, et qui est confiné sur terre. C'est une histoire de confinement. La deuxième histoire récurrente dans le texte coranique, c'est l'histoire des fils d'Israël, de leur confinement en Égypte et de leur déconfinement par l'exode et la marche vers la Terre Sainte. Troisième repère coranique, dans Surat Yasin, nous avons l'habitude de lire dans la voix, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ سُدًّا وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سُدًّا فَأَغْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. Dieu nous parle des gens qui sont confinés entre deux barrières, qui sont coupés de leurs origines et de leur devenir. C'est le confinement le plus strict. C'est le confinement des gens du matérialisme, qu'il soit théorique et philosophique ou qu'il soit pratique, c'est-à-dire le matérialisme de la consommation et de la distraction. Quatrième repère coranique, ce sont les histoires extraordinaires de l'ascension du Christ, que la paix soit sur lui, et du prophète Sidna Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ce sont deux histoires de déconfinement. Dans l'histoire de Sidna Adam descend et est coupé de son origine spirituelle. Il descend dans l'état humain. Dans les histoires d'ascension, l'homme refait le chemin en sens inverse pour retrouver son origine spirituelle. Sidna Isa retrouve sa nature spirituelle puisqu'il est pour nous l'esprit et la parole de Dieu. Et Sidna Mohammed retrouve aussi sa nature spirituelle qui est considérée comme la nature spirituelle la plus élevée, à travers ce que les soufis appellent l'esprit mohammedien ou la réalité mohammedienne. Et puis cinquième et dernier repère coranique, qui intéresse bien sûr particulièrement les soufis, sont sensibles à ce qui est d'ordre intérieur, c'est le confinement et le déconfinement intérieur, qui s'adresse à tous les hommes. Et là, les passages coraniques sont univoques. Le Coran nous parle de la fermeture des cœurs, et puis on a de très nombreux passages qui parlent de l'ouverture des cœurs et de leur élargissement, notamment à travers les deux sourates, Surat al-Fath, l'ouverture, et Surat al-Sharh, l'élargissement, qui nous décrivent les états prophétiques d'ouverture intérieure. Ce thème coranique du confinement et du déconfinement se retrouve au cœur de la voix, je reviendrai là-dessus, et donc il se retrouve aussi dans son expression, il se retrouve dans la littérature soufie. Je veux donner quelques références parmi les œuvres majeures de la littérature soufie qui parlent de ce thème du confinement et du déconfinement. Je donnerai deux références pour le confinement, une référence pour le déconfinement et puis une référence sur l'alternance du confinement et du déconfinement. La première histoire qu'on retrouve dans la littérature soufie, et qui est parmi les plus belles, c'est une histoire qui est très connue, qui est racontée par Maulana Jalal-Din Rumi, radiyallahu anhu. C'est l'histoire de la flûte de roseau, qui est coupée de sa roselière, et qui, de ce fait, produit ce son particulier qui exprime nostalgie, lamentation, et qui parle bien sûr aux hommes, qui leur rappelle leur séparation. Aux initiés, bien sûr, il rappelle la première séparation, il rappelle le confinement dans l'état humain et la séparation de l'homme de son origine spirituelle. Cette histoire racontée par Maulana Jalal-Din Rumi est probablement le plus beau commentaire des passages coraniques qui racontent la descente de Sidna Adam sur terre, c'est-à-dire le confinement de l'homme dans l'état humain. La deuxième référence, c'est l'histoire le récit de l'exil occidental qu'on doit à Sohrawardi radiallahu anhu, et qui nous parle de l'exil occidental. Bien sûr, Sohrawardi est un homme qui est très sensible à la symbolique de la lumière. Son œuvre est empreinte de cette symbolique. Et il nous raconte exactement la même histoire dans le registre de la symbolique de la lumière. Il nous parle de l'Orient et de l'Occident symbolique, du point de vue initiatique. L'Orient symbolique, c'est le pays de l'esprit, donc c'est le pays, la patrie d'origine de l'homme. Et l'Occident symbolique, c'est la terre d'exil de l'homme qui descend dans cet état humain et qui est coupé de son origine. C'est le pays où règne la dimension psychique de l'homme qui éclipse plus ou moins sa dimension spirituelle, son esprit. Pour ce qui est du registre opposé, c'est-à-dire le registre du déconfinement spirituel de l'homme, on peut citer une œuvre majeure de Ibn Arabi qui s'intitule Al-Isra ila Maqam al-Asra et qu'il a l'habitude d'appeler l'ouverture fascie, puisque c'est une œuvre qui lui a été inspirée lorsqu'il a séjourné à Fès au Maroc. Dans cette œuvre, Ibn Arabi radiallahu anhu nous décrit le déconfinement spirituel, le sien en l'occurrence, en termes de réalisation spirituelle des degrés les plus élevés de ce qu'on appelle l'héritage mohammedien. Le terme de ce déconfinement, de cette réalisation spirituelle, c'est cette position ultime que le Saint-Coran appelle Qaba Qawsayni aw Adna, à deux portées d'arc ou encore plus près, et qu'on peut comprendre comme étant la position où l'homme, complètement déconfiné, est complètement ouvert sur Dieu et donc sur l'infini, et que par la même occasion, il échappe à toutes les déterminations. Les anges, par exemple, qui sont des êtres confinés très haut, ne peuvent échapper à la détermination. Il y a un verset coranique qui nous le dit, « وَمَا مِنَّا إِلَّا لَهُ مَقَامٌ مَعْلُومٌ » Et donc c'est pour ça que les gens de la voie appellent cette position particulière, qui correspondrait donc à un déconfinement total, ils l'appellent la maqam, ça veut dire aucune détermination. La dernière référence littéraire que j'aimerais citer en rapport avec ce thème du confinement et du déconfinement spirituel, c'est le livre de Massignon consacré à la vie, aux paroles et aux poèmes d'Al-Hallaj. Ce que Massignon appelle la passion d'Al-Hallaj est tout simplement cette alternance à très grande amplitude de ces périodes de confinement et de déconfinement spirituel. On peut résumer la vie d'Al-Hallaj en disant que c'est une alternance à très grande amplitude d'ivresse et de manque, d'exaltation dans l'union et de douleur extrême dans la séparation. Bien sûr, la littérature soufie n'est pas la voie soufie. La littérature soufie, c'est un partage qui va au-delà des gens de la voie et qui s'adresse à tous les gens dotés de sensibilité et d'intelligence. C'est aussi une manifestation, et donc c'est un témoignage. Mais c'est aussi un appel et une invitation. Témoignage et appel font partie des fonctions de la sainteté dans le cadre de l'héritage prophétique. Ce sont des fonctions prophétiques. Pour souligner cette différence entre la littérature soufie et la voie soufie, je dirais que c'est la différence entre se faire une idée de quelque chose et la vivre réellement, c'est-à-dire la réaliser. Par exemple, l'histoire racontée par Maulana Jalal-Din Rumi, l'histoire de la flûte de roseau, elle est réellement vécue dans une voie vivante, à travers des états qu'on appelle les états du faqd, et qui succèdent généralement à des états opposés qu'on appelle les états du wajd. Ce sont les états de celui qui a trouvé et qui a ensuite perdu ce qu'il a trouvé. L'Occident symbolique de Sahrawardi, pour les gens qui sont dans la voie, ce n'est rien d'autre que l'insouciance, ce n'est rien d'autre que le pays de l'insouciance. Et l'Orient de Sahrawardi, ce n'est rien d'autre que le pays du dhikr. On va vers l'Orient, on retrouve le chemin de l'Orient en allant vers les assemblées de dhikr autorisées et en allant rencontrer et visiter les gens de Dieu qui sont pleinement en Orient, puisqu'ils sont pleinement dans le dhikr. L'alternance manifestée à l'extrême, mais avec cette amplitude extraordinaire par Al-Hallaj radiyallahu anhu, est vécue par tous les gens qui sont dans une voie vivante et qui ont rencontré un maître vivant. C'est le signe de cette vie spirituelle transmise par le maître vivant. On en trouve la trace dans la tradition prophétique à travers un hadith qui est très célèbre et qui ne peut être compris que dans le cadre de la voie. C'est le hadith Nafaq Hamdallah. Et le prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, lorsqu'il parle de cette alternance, il a une formule extraordinaire. Il dit Ya Hamdallah sa'atan wa sa'a. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a un temps pour trouver et puis un temps pour perdre. Parce que lorsqu'on a perdu, on peut gagner. On peut gagner au moins la pauvreté, la tolérance et la compassion. Pour finir, je prie Allah de nous soulager et je le prie également pour qu'il prête longue vie à notre maître Sidi Jamal, qu'il nous fasse profiter pleinement de son degré spirituel et de sa pauvreté. Je prie Allah pour qu'il assiste Sidi Mounir, tout ce qu'il entreprend, et qu'il nous fasse profiter de sa himma et de son énergie. Il vous dit Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Bahtat, for such a deep and clear explanation of the Sufi perspective on the experience of confinement and relief. It is a reminder of the words of the great Sufi master, Maulana Rumi, may Allah be pleased with him. That is why in every Sufi retreat, all the openings are sealed shut, so that from your light the house becomes more illumined. And to continue on this theme, I am very pleased to welcome Sidi Adnan Jilani, a Sufi fakir and follower of the Tariqah and educator from the Tariqah in Manchester in the UK. He will be introducing some of the themes of the famous Qasida al-Munfarija, and straight after Sidi Adnan's introduction, we will have the pleasure of hearing a recitation of the Qasida from the Fakira singers from the Qadri Buchishia Tariqah in Paris and Birmingham.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Many things have changed, and this pandemic of COVID-19, its impact has been felt physically, naturally, psychologically, and emotionally. And this has all impacted on our spirituality, not least in the way we conduct even our gatherings or even our worship. But one thing has not changed: the nature of spirituality. The spiritual path is that you try to know yourself. In fact, it is said, who knows himself knows his Lord. And this is a journey we are all in. First of all, I would like to thank our Sheikh Sidi Jamal for his companionship and his love, and to Sidi Munir for allowing us to establish these types of online events to share our thoughts and experience of spirituality in times of COVID, and to give us and others sustenance. We shall hear in a moment some singing by the Faqirat from Birmingham in the UK and from Paris in France, of the very famous poem called the Munfarija by Ibn Nahw, the celebrated Sufi saint from the Middle Age from North Africa. The Munfarija is also called in English, it's the poem of relief. There are different adhkars and different methods used to support the human being in times of difficulty and adversity. The Burda, for example, is often recited by those who have had health difficulties, and this is used in many tariqas as well. However, when it comes to extreme adversity or difficulty or threat to a lifestyle or something like this pandemic, the Munfarija is often resorted to. The poem in itself tries to change our perspective and to flip the way we perceive adversity. In fact, what Ibn Nahw does in this poem is to translate adversity into a personage, with whom he converses in some ways, reflecting on the relationship of the human being with the divine. The aim is to use adversity against all the odds as a tool for spiritual development and progression. There is a parallel between the poem and the peaks of the infection rates for COVID-19. The peaks of the graphs, that we have all seen in news broadcasts, is similar to the peaks of adversity that we hear referred to in the poem, in the Munfarija. To know the nature of the adversity we are facing, and therefore to know how to deal with our foe and to convert it into a tool to help us, we need to acknowledge its heights, and almost welcome it into our lives as a presence to be dealt with. It's often said that the night is the darkest just before the dawn. Daylight is just after the deepest part of the third part of the night. And it is this feeling that the Munfarija tries to evoke in us, calling to us to persevere in difficulties and asking us to be patient and to see Allah in all things. In life's difficulties, we often say, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Surely in difficulty is found ease. After difficulty is found ease. This poem is of great benefit to those who recite it. The Munfarija comes from, the word Munfarija comes from infiraj, when you are stuck between two different points and you seek release from this confinement between difficulties. And when you release it, that is get the relief. That is the منفرجة. To give you an idea of the meaning of this poem before we listen it in Arabic, I shall read to you the first verse, and I hope you enjoy the recitation that is to follow, and that you are able to feel the resonance of its overall meaning. Get worse, O trouble, so that you may be lifted, for your night has announced the breaking of the dawn, and even the darkness of the night has its gleams, until the father of these gleams overwhelms them, and the dark clouds of bounty carry rain that comes when it is time is nigh. The blessings of our Lord are many, so your soul and heart's blood can roam free, and the blessings have a life-given scent. So go to the source of that scent, and sometimes there is an overflowing of life, oceans of waves of surging depths. All creation is in his hands. Some are expanded, while others are constricted. Their descents and ascents are either down a level or up a step, and their lives and their ends are not happening at random. Their wisdom have been woven together by the hands of faith, and they have been knitted into the weaver. And so, if things seem narrow and bent, know that it was meant to be like this. Their marvels have been witnessed as proofs, establishing the matter upon these proofs. Contentment with God's decree is the knot, so make it your focus and turn your mind towards it. And if the doors of guidance are opened, then hurry into their treasures and stay there. Barakallahu feekum. Thank you very much for everything. Assalamu alaikum.
اشتدي أزمة تنفرجي قد آذن ليلك بالبلج وظلام الليل يحوس رجون حتى يغشاه أبو السرج وصحاب الخير لها مطرون فإذا جاء الإيمان تجي وفوائد مولانا جمل لسروح الأنفس ولها أرجل محيين عبدا فاقصد مهيادك عرجي فلرب تمافد المحيا ببحار الموج من الوجج والخلق جميعا في يده فله سعة وله حرج ونزولهم وطلوعهم فإلى درك وعلى فرج ومعايشهم وعواقبهم ليست في المشي على عوج حكم نسجت بيد حكمت ثم انتسجت بالمنتسج فإذا اقتصدت ثم انعرجت فبمقتصدين وبمنعرج شهدت بعجائبها هجج قامت بالأمر على حجج ورضا بقضاء لها أبواب حدى فجل خزائنها ولجي وإذا حاولت نهايتها فاحذر إذاك من العرج لتكون من السباق إذا ما جئت إلى تلك الفرج فهناك العيش وبهجته فلممتلج ولممتلج فبشر على المال إذا رقدت وإذا ما عشت إذا انتهجي فمعاصي الله سماجتها تزداد لذي الخلق السمج ولطاعته وسماحتها أنوار الصباح مبتلج من يخطب حور العين بها يهدى بالحور وبالهنج فكن المردي لها بتقى ترداه غدا وتكون لجي واتلو القرآن بقلب ذي حزن وبصوت فيه شجي وصلاة الليل مسافتها فاذهب فيها بالفهم وجي وتأملها ومعانيها تأتي الفردوس وتبتهج واشرب تسنيم مفجرها لا ممتسج وبمنتسج مدح العقل الآتيه هدى وهو متولٍ عنه يجي وكتاب الله عيادته لعقول الناس بمندرج وخيار الخلق هداتهم وسواهم من همج الهمج وإذا كنت مهتم فلا تزدى في الحرب من الرمج وإذا أبصرت منار هدى فاظهر فردا فوق التبج وإذا اشتاقت نفس وجدت ألما بالشوق المعتلج وتنايا الحصنى ضاحكة وتمام الضحك على الفرج وغياب الأسرار اجتمعت بأمانتها تحت الشرج والرفق يضم لصاحبه والخلق يسير إلى الحرج صلوات الله على المهدي الهادي الخلق إلى النهج وأبي بكر في سيرته ولسان مقالته اللهج وأبي حفص وكرامته في قصة سارية الخلج وأبي عمرو ذي نورين المستهد المستحي الفحج وأبي حسن في العلم إذا وافى بسهائبه الخلج وعلى السبتين وأمهما وجميع الآل بمندرج وصحابته وقرابته وقفاة الإثم على عوج وعلى تبائهم العلماء بعوارفهم البهج يا رب بهم وبآلهم عاجل بالنصر وبالفرج وارحم يا أكرم من رحم عبدا عن بابك لم يعج واختم عملي بخواتمها لأكون غدا في الحشر نجي لكني بجودك معترف فاقبل بمعادي يا حججي وإذا بك ضاق الأمر فقل اشتري أزمة الفرج.
Thank you for Kirat, for Qasida singing of Munfairija. How beautiful, how elegantly, how poetically that was sung, how it touched our hearts. Thank you all for that insight, mashallah. I'd now like to introduce a dialogue between Lala Farida and Dr. Gregory Van Dam. Lala Farida from Paris on behalf of Bridging Spiritual Cultures, interviewing doctoral researcher Dr. Gregory Van Dam from the University of Louvain in Belgium, Doctor of Islamic Studies on studying Ibn Arabiya, and they'll be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on communities in Belgium.
Assalamu alaikum, bonjour. Dans le cadre de cet événement organisé par l'association BSPC, j'ai le plaisir de m'entretenir aujourd'hui avec Grégory Van Dam, qui est chercheur doctorant à l'université de Louvain en Belgique. Bonjour Grégory.
Bonjour.
Alors, est-ce que vous pouvez vous présenter et nous dire pourquoi on vous a invité aujourd'hui?
Je suis chercheur à l'université de Louvain avec un mandat du FNRS. Je travaille sur la pensée soufie, l'histoire de la pensée soufie, et en particulier la pensée du grand maître andalou Ibn Arabi. Et je travaille aussi avec l'association VSMB, donc Valeurs et Spiritualité musulmane de Belgique. Ici en Belgique, c'est une association qui vise à faire connaître la culture et le patrimoine spirituel et culturel du soufisme au grand public.
Alors, comment en êtes-vous venu à préparer votre doctorat sur Ibn Arabi?
Alors, c'est une longue histoire, hein. Je vais essayer de la faire très courte. En fait, j'ai rencontré l'islam très jeune, vers 15 ans, et puis j'ai vécu l'islam de manière très isolée, tout seul, vraiment dans mon coin, sans connaître de musulmans, sans être vraiment, on va dire, orienté là-dessus. Et après un voyage au Maroc à 18 ans, où j'ai été très déconcerté par la multiplicité des façons de vivre l'islam, lorsque je suis rentré en Belgique, en fait par la musique, parce que j'aimais beaucoup la musique, je suis rentré, on va dire, en contact avec un CD de musique soufie, et donc j'ai appris qu'il y avait quelque chose en islam qui s'appelait le soufisme. Et très vite, en fait, en lisant ce qui était décrit, et puis en me renseignant, en achetant un livre ou deux, je me suis rendu compte que en fait, le soufisme, c'était vraiment cet islam qui m'avait touché étant plus jeune, et cet islam que je cherchais en fait, depuis le début. Et donc voilà, très vite, j'ai été en contact avec une voix, une tariqa soufie. Et puis, en fait, je suis revenu aux études bien plus tard, vers 27 ans. Et les choses... en fait, je n'ai pas du tout repris les études pour étudier le soufisme, mais les choses ont fait. Le destin a voulu que je me retrouve petit à petit, en fait, à travailler sur la pensée du soufisme et maintenant à terminer cette thèse sur Ibn Arabi. Donc, c'est un peu providentiel, j'avoue. C'était pas un plan que j'avais décidé dès le début. Les choses se sont un peu imposées à moi.
Et donc, du coup, par rapport à votre expérience du soufisme, comment pensez-vous qu'en Belgique, cette crise a été vécue? Et est-ce que vous avez des exemples de votre entourage, de ce que vous avez pu constater par rapport à cette crise du Covid en Belgique, plus précisément?
Alors, autour de moi, en fait, vraiment, les réactions ont été très variées. Et moi-même, je pense que ça a été une expérience qui est toujours en cours, dont j'ai peut-être pas encore d'ailleurs assez de recul pour vraiment mesurer tout ce qui s'est passé pendant tout ce temps. Mais ce qui est sûr, c'est que j'ai remarqué que toutes les mesures de confinement, évidemment, parce que je pense que c'est ça qui a été le plus marquant, encore plus que l'idée d'une crise sanitaire, l'idée des gestes barrières dans les lieux publics, etc. J'ai vraiment l'impression que c'est surtout le confinement qui a marqué les esprits, qui a marqué les gens autour de moi. Et ce que j'ai remarqué, c'est que c'est en fait la rupture des habitudes. Le fait de se retrouver obligé de changer totalement sa manière de vivre du jour au lendemain, ça a été un grand choc pour beaucoup de gens qui d'habitude étaient assez confortablement installés dans une série d'habitudes, et là se retrouvaient tout d'un coup coupés de tout cela et se retrouver un peu avec eux-mêmes. Et donc, évidemment, que les gens qui étaient déjà dans une pratique spirituelle, des gens qui étaient déjà en fait en quête de se retrouver seuls avec eux-mêmes, souvent autour de pratiques de méditation, etc., étaient préparés en fait à ce genre d'épreuve. De même avec les habitudes. Je pense que les gens qui sont dans une pratique spirituelle, et en particulier celle du soufisme, travaillent toujours à essayer de briser l'attachement aux habitudes. Et donc, quelque part, cette crise a été voilà, une occasion de mettre ces choses en pratique, une occasion de tester où on en était par rapport à cette capacité voilà, à vivre sans nos habitudes et à se retrouver avec nous-mêmes. Il y a une sorte de retraite spirituelle forcée en fait, qui a été mise en place. Et donc, j'ai pu voir autour de moi que les gens mieux préparés spirituellement trouvaient du sens dans cette situation, et les autres, par contre, oui, trouvaient ça très, très difficile.
Par rapport à vous et votre pratique personnelle, qu'est-ce qui a changé pendant cette période?
Alors, j'avoue qu'en plus, moi, mon travail de recherche, etc., fait que j'étais déjà dans une forme de travail dans une atmosphère un peu d'introspection, de bulle, etc. Et c'est vrai que ça n'a pas été facile d'avoir en fait toutes mes activités, à la fois spirituelles et à la fois professionnelles, dans la même bulle. De devoir en fait tout intégrer et de ne pas avoir ces moments séparés où on va au travail, on revient du travail, on va dans un endroit pour pratiquer voilà, les rituels du soufisme ou des choses comme ça. Et d'avoir tout au même endroit, en fait, de nouveau, ça m'a obligé à intérioriser énormément de choses, à être beaucoup plus observant de ce qui se passait autour de moi et à l'intérieur de moi. Et donc, c'est comme si, en fait, tout devenait, voilà, tout devenait, en fait, une retraite spirituelle de nouveau, mais même le travail prenait une dimension spirituelle très forte. Et j'avoue que ça n'a pas toujours été facile. Ça n'a pas toujours été facile, notamment de trouver la manière de structurer le travail, de structurer les journées, parce que du coup, on n'a plus des marqueurs extérieurs qui s'imposent à nous et à partir duquel on s'organise. Heureusement, dans la pratique, il y a quand même les temps des prières, par exemple, les invocations, etc., qui donnent du rythme aux journées et qui nous permettent de reconstruire une forme de structure dans notre journée et de ne pas être, par exemple, tout le temps au travail. Moi, j'ai eu tendance à des moments où, en fait, à être un peu tout le temps dans mon travail, dès le matin, tard le soir. Et en fait, entre-temps, on essaye de trouver un moment pour pouvoir aller faire les courses, parce que ce n'est pas facile avec les mesures de confinement, etc., ou aller s'occuper d'un proche ou ceci. Et donc, avoir des journées structurées, ce n'était pas facile. Et je trouve que le rythme des pratiques spirituelles et le rythme des pratiques religieuses en général a aidé à structurer les journées.
Et justement, par rapport à cette nouvelle normalité et tout ce qui a changé pour tout le monde en même temps, partout, du coup, comment vous avez adapté dans votre voie les pratiques et l'accueil des personnes en recherche, etc.
En fait, il y a deux éléments différents. Il y a les pratiques en elles-mêmes, les réunions de rituels, et puis il y a les événements plus publics qu'on organise ponctuellement, généralement au moins une fois par mois. Alors au niveau des pratiques, en fait, assez vite, on a essayé de trouver un moyen que les rituels aient lieu et qu'on puisse se réunir via Zoom, via les plateformes en ligne. Et donc, voilà, les choses se sont construites. Ça a mis du temps à trouver une forme de normalité, on va dire, mais on s'est vite retrouvé dans une situation dans laquelle, en fait, on a eu le même programme, mais en ligne. Alors, évidemment, il y a eu des petits changements pratiques au niveau du contenu et tout ça, mais au niveau de la régularité, c'est vite devenu la même chose, avec petit à petit aussi une façon d'améliorer ça, parce que c'est pas facile de pratiquer ce genre de rituel, de méditation en ligne devant un ordinateur. C'est encore moins facile lorsque, comme moi, on passe déjà toute la journée derrière son ordinateur à écrire, etc. Et puis que lorsqu'on veut justement passer à autre chose, on se retrouve de nouveau devant le même ordinateur. Et donc, de nouveau, ça force à intérioriser tout, parce qu'à l'extérieur, c'est juste pas possible. Mais une chose qu'on a trouvée, par exemple, qui a aidé, c'est que là où normalement, c'est une personne qui dirige en fait les invocations, hein, les récitations, les chants et les autres qui suivent, en fait, on s'est rendu compte que c'était très difficile pour une personne toute seule derrière son ordinateur de diriger, et surtout, c'était encore plus difficile pour les autres d'être passivement chez eux, tout seuls à répéter. Et donc, on a commencé à répartir en fait les différentes parties du rituel pour que chacun puisse se l'approprier, et ça a rendu les réunions beaucoup plus vivantes. Ça a vraiment amélioré énormément la qualité, je trouve, des réunions. Donc ça, c'est pour les réunions d'invocation, de méditation. Pour les réunions publiques, on a aussi mis du temps à s'adapter, parce que c'est vraiment pas facile en fait de proposer quelque chose de pertinent vu la répétitivité des activités en ligne. Et donc, il y a eu, tout le monde en fait s'est mis à faire des activités en ligne, évidemment, mais donc il y a eu énormément de conférences. Nous-mêmes, entre nous, dans nos réseaux, etc., on a essayé d'organiser des choses régulières, mais c'est difficile de ne pas se répéter parce qu'en ligne, les formules sont un peu toujours la même chose. Et donc voilà, on a aussi mis du temps, et on est toujours en recherche de proposer des choses qui ne sont pas trop monotones, et surtout de trouver un moyen d'avoir une interactivité avec le public. Dans nos événements avant le Covid, on essayait justement d'avoir un côté atelier pratique, vraiment d'être en interaction, en dialogue avec le public, et pas simplement des conférences où voilà, quelqu'un qui expose quelque chose ex cathedra et le public qui écoute. Et passer à cela en ligne, c'est pas facile, parce que les gens ont moins de facilité à interagir en ligne, mais petit à petit, on essaie de trouver des formules qui permettent aux gens d'interagir.
Donc on pourrait dire que vous avez vraiment pris ça comme une opportunité d'améliorer un petit peu ce que vous proposiez et de changer en travaillant de façon collaborative sur ce nouveau format qui devait de toute façon s'adapter à la situation.
Tout à fait. Voilà, en fait, on n'a pas du tout eu le choix. Et donc ça, c'est quelque chose de positif. C'est qu'une fois qu'on n'a pas le choix, on arrête de se casser la tête, et on essaie de vraiment trouver des solutions. Et je pense que ça a été très intéressant à ce niveau-là, parce qu'en effet, ce sont toutes des choses qu'on n'aurait sans doute peut-être pas explorées et qui vont rester des outils, en fait. Même si les choses devaient revenir à une certaine normalité, eh ben, on aura des nouvelles cordes à notre arc, quelque part, qui sont pas inintéressantes du tout.
Par rapport à l'année qui s'est écoulée et la société dans laquelle on vit, qui déjà depuis plusieurs années est un monde qu'on qualifie parfois de VUCA, c'est un acronyme américain qui parle du côté volatile, incertain, complexe et ambigu de la société aujourd'hui. Comment vous avez expérimenté cette année passée, cette crise du Covid? Quelle a été votre expérience et quelles ont été les leçons que vous avez retenues ou apprises en cette période?
Eh ben, je pense que c'est de nouveau... en fait, tout a été de plus en plus incertain à l'extérieur. C'est-à-dire qu'il y avait la situation de la pandémie qui était très incertaine, mais aussi en fait les nouvelles qu'on en avait par les médias sociaux, par aussi le téléphone arabe et la rumeur populaire, qui fait qu'en fait tout était incertain, même dans les médias officiels, on voyait des contradictions, des choses. Et donc en fait, je pense que ce qui a été intéressant, c'est qu'il y a vraiment eu une obligation d'intérioriser un maximum les choses, c'est-à-dire de s'occuper de notre réalité très concrète, de notre réalité intérieure avant tout, et puis de notre foyer, vraiment des gens qui nous entourent, et pas commencer à se perdre dans trop de choses. Et Et je pense que ça, c'est vraiment la grande leçon. C'est vraiment la grande leçon parce que le fait aussi que le digital ait pris autant de place, parce que c'était le seul moyen de travailler, d'avoir des échanges, etc. Mais le digital est vraiment un lieu d'incertitude, de confusion, etc. Et donc, ça a permis, j'espère, enfin, pour moi personnellement, mais j'espère que ce sera une façon aussi d'avoir une certaine maturité dans notre rapport au digital. Où avant, on ne se rendait peut-être pas compte de l'état dans lequel ce média l'état dans lequel il nous mettait et l'espèce de dépendance inconsciente qu'on avait aussi. Là, le fait d'y être confronté tous les jours, à chaque instant de la journée, peut-être que ça nous a rendus plus conscients et que du coup, ça permet de développer des pratiques plus saines par rapport à cela et plus centrées justement sur notre état intérieur.
Je vous remercie, Grégory. Ce qui me vient à l'esprit, c'est que il est très intéressant à travers votre partage, en fait, de voir l'expérience d'un disciple dans un pays qui, à mon avis, ressemble beaucoup à l'expérience de beaucoup d'entre nous partout dans le monde, partout où les gens vont écouter cette interview. Et le côté positif que vous arrivez à transmettre et que vous avez retenu de toute cette expérience. Donc, merci à vous. Je conclurai donc cette interview en vous remerciant à nouveau et en souhaitant à tous ceux et celles qui nous ont regardés la paix intérieure et extérieure. Donc, salam alaikum à tous et au revoir.
Merci beaucoup.
Many thanks to Lela Farida and to Dr. Gregory Van Dam for such a very touching and illuminating dialogue and providing us with such an interesting reflection on the impact of COVID individually and on members of the Sufi community in Belgium generally. Thank you also for those reflections on the study of Sufism and the importance of the great contribution of Sayyidina Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi. We now have the pleasure of sharing a very beautiful film from our brothers in Belgium, singing a qasida from another great Sufi from Andalusia, Sidi Abu al-Hassan al-Shustari, from the 7th century Hijra calendar, or the 13th century Christian era. His songs, which speak of the deepest spiritual matters in the everyday language of the time, are still sung in Sufi gatherings to this day. This one is entitled Atyab Mahi Awqati. My sweetest moments are when I am one with my essence. Here are a few lines of its translation by Lord Maria Alvarez. My sweetest moments are when I am one with my essence. When I am one with my deepest self, my intimacy rises from me like the sun. Poverty comes naturally to me. Set aside the others, understand the secrets. Enter the arena, and you will see the past and present. My sweetest moments are when I am one with my essence. very much to the group Safa of Belgium for that joyful expression of spiritual love and togetherness. We are now very pleased to be able to bring you an intervention from Mr. Ibrahim Salama, a former Egyptian diplomat who serves with the United Nations as the Chief of the Human Rights Treaties Division. He is the coordinator of the Faith for Rights program that focuses on the complementarities between religions and human rights. His intervention will be on the interfaith dimension of defending human rights, including, but not limited to, the freedom of religion or belief. We will now show a short video that outlines the 18 Faith for Rights commitments on which Ibrahim Salama will then comment.
We commit to ensure non-discrimination and gender equality, particularly regarding harmful stereotypes and practices or gender-based violence. We pledge to ensure non-discrimination and gender equality in implementing this declaration on Faith for Rights. We specifically commit to revisit, each within our respective areas of competence, those religious understandings and interpretations that appear to perpetuate gender inequality, harmful stereotypes, or even condone gender-based violence. Justice and equal worth of everyone, as well as to affirm the right of all women, girls, and boys not to be subjected to any form of discrimination and violence. This is our pledge. This is our commitment.
Pour être efficace, toute approche globale de renforcement des capacités devrait cibler les dirigeants influents. Notamment les chefs traditionnels et religieux.
Shalom Nashaku.
ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਪੰਡ ਜੰਮੀਏ ਪੰਡ ਨਿੰਮੀਏ ਪੰਡ ਮੰਗਣ ਵਿਆਹੋ ਪੰਡੋ ਹੋਵੇ ਦੋਸਤੀ ਪੰਡੋ ਚੱਲੇ ਰਾਹੋ ਪੰਡ ਮੁਆ ਪੰਡ ਪਾਲੀਏ ਪੰਡ ਹੋਵੇ ਬੰਧਾਨ ਸੋ ਕਿਉ ਮੰਦਾ ਆਖੀਏ ਜਿਤ ਜੰਮੇ ਰਾਜਾਨ ਪੰਡੋ ਹੀ ਪੰਡ ਉਪਜੇ ਪੰਡੇ ਬਾਜ ਨ ਕੋਏ ਨਾਨਕ ਪੰਡੇ ਬਾਹਰਾ ਇੱਕੋ ਸਾਚਾ ਸੋਏ।
The world of humanity is possessed of two wings, the male and the female. So long as these two wings are not equivalent in strength, the bird will not fly. Until womankind reaches the same degree as man, until she enjoys the same arena of activity, extraordinary attainment for humanity will not be realized. Abdul Wahab.
Chesed ve'emet nifkashu, tzedek ve'shalom nashaku.
Madad, 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 ya
This is our pledge. This is our commitment.
Distinguished viewers, it's a pleasure to join you in tonight's reflection on spirituality and COVID-19. When she saw me preparing, my daughter asked me, but what's the link between spirituality and COVID-19? And I said, thank you. I think you gave me the thread to my intervention. And I think your question, what is the relationship between spirituality and COVID-19, is the first question that I should address. And the second question is that what should we learn from this relationship? What can we make out of it concretely? I sincerely believe that the link between spirituality and COVID-19 is that spirituality allows us to go beyond the facade, to scratch beyond the surface, and to try to get into the inner meaning of things. This is spirituality. The current crisis as well taught us how much we learn. We need each other. I mean, nobody is safe until and unless everybody is safe. So you can be fortunate, but still, if those whom you meet in the street or whom you serve you are not safe, you are at risk as well. The third relationship is that you need to be much more kind to others. If you are only materialistic, it makes no sense to be kind to others or to give to others. It's only when you have a moral compass, and this is what religions and faith and spirituality at large provide, that you start thinking about others. So spirituality, we realized how much we needed in a time of crisis where nobody is safe until everybody is safe. And when all what we know, because what makes people more tyrannic and more unkind, it's that they become too powerful. And the key message and the key lesson and link between spirituality and COVID-19 is that despite all our scientific advances, we're still 1 year ahead, 1 year after the COVID-19, and we're still unsure about too many things about it. And it changed completely our lives. And I believe that it is our need for an inner sense for all what's happening that will be our way out of it. Now, if this is a relationship, what is it that we should learn from it? Remember that I used my first 5 minutes to show a short video of 5 minutes, so my total time will hopefully be respected 10 minutes, about the Faithful Rights Initiative. And it was a merger of singing in different languages and with different faith traditions.
telling the story of the faithful rights commitments, which is another subtle relationship between human rights on one hand and religious and faith traditions on the other hand. In fact, both religions and human rights are roads to a goal. The problem is when the road becomes the goal, or when the intentions of those who take the roads isn't really faithful to the goal. In both cases, you have a conflict. And the Faithful Rights Initiative is an attempt to bring spirituality and the inner motivation and the kindness into the human rights discourse and the daily lives in 4 ways. And those 4 ways are what I call my answer to the second question: what do we learn from the relationship between spirituality and human rights? And the 4 shifts that I believe are our lessons and our gateway to the future. They are our, like the Al-Munfarij, the poem of Khalif tells us, it's our way to the resolution of this existential crisis. The first key is the togetherness versus the otherness. And the second one is that from only the important role of religious and faith actors into the inter-religious and interfaith actors' collective action. And the third shift is from simply wishful thinking and saying the right things into committing to act together. And these 3 shifts you will find in the video that you saw. And if you replay it back, you will see that the first sentence is, we commit to ensure 1, 2, 3. And that the last sentence is, Madad ya Allah. So God help us. In the sense that if we commit to act and act together on certain areas, then the salvation and the support and the benediction of God takes us like the wind takes the boat into destination. So in a nutshell, these 18 commitments, and you saw them all on the screen, and I invite you to quietly rewatch that video. It is a set of commitments that have been undertaken by faith actors from different traditions. And it's not only based on human rights norms and standards, but it is also fully grounded in faith traditions and codes. This declaration on faithful rights, and if you Google Faith for Rights, you will find the framework and its toolkit for implementation. And this is the document that I wanted to present, and I will not venture to try to squeeze it into more time. Just watch once again the previous video and you will read the succinct peer-to-peer learning tool that have been prepared by faith actors themselves. I wish you a successful night and a blessed reflection. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Ibrahim Salam from the United Nations, and to all the diverse participants in the video from so many different faith backgrounds. With those thoughts of fairness, equality, faith tolerance and gender equality in mind, as well as the rights of children, I would like to now introduce you to the next dialogue. This is between Dr. Asma Bygate, researcher and lecturer in history and politics, on behalf of Bridging Spiritual Cultures, interviewing Kohanat Yael, student rabbi from the Leo Beck College in North London, member of the Makor Haim Synagogue, London, and founder of Yilala, an online initiative for Jewish women. Also accompanying this will be a recitation in English and Hebrew, an adaptation by Rabbi Hill Hammer of some of the biblical verses from Exodus 15:11, with music and translation by Kohanat Yael. Enjoy.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. It's lovely to have you with us this evening. Kohanat Yael Tishler. I know you're a student rabbi at Leo Beck College, and we're really honored to get your contributions this evening. As you know, we're looking at spiritual communities under COVID and how they've experienced this time in almost enforced isolation in some ways. And we're really keen to get reflections from your community and your own experience. So maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and then go on to that experience as we went into the pandemic?
Sure, I'd love to. So I'm a Kohenet, which means that I studied at the Kohenet Hebrew Priestess Institute, which is a clergy training program for Jewish women and femfolk that reclaims and revives the practices of Jewish women who have been spiritual leaders from ancient Israel to the present day. So it's like the most awesome Jewish women's studies course you've ever had, because it asks not only what did we do, what were we doing, but also how can we integrate that into contemporary spiritual life. And I'm also a student rabbi at Leo Baeck College, which is the progressive institute for rabbinic training here in the UK in London. And sort of part of my time is spent co-running a community called Yelala, which sort of looks at bringing a Kohenet style of spiritual practice and worship here to the UK. And I'm also a congregant at Makor Chaim Synagogue, which is a creative, very warm, friendly Reform community here in London.
That sounds fabulous. And you sound like a very busy, engaging person, which is always great to hear. Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit more about how, your community, whether the one you administer to or the one you're part of, how it started to experience the pandemic, perhaps in the early days initially?
So I would say for Yelala, for the community that I co-lead with Kohenet Rachel Rose Reeds, the early days were actually a point of great excitement, surprisingly, because in the past, we'd struggled to get, even 10 people in the room together. Our most successful events were kind of retreats throughout the year where we could kind of hope for 30. But my colleague and I looked at each other at the beginning of lockdown and we were like, oh, well, we have to do something online. We have to do an online song circle. People are looking for this. And we were just shocked at how many people showed up, because people were looking for spiritual nourishments in this time. And the core members of our community who have become regulars and were attracted at that point are people who are physically disabled and could not normally come to a service, are people who are scattered throughout the UK, in Aberystwyth, in Bristol, in Exeter. They're people who are kind of yearning for this type of community, who never had access to it before. So from the very early days, it was this explosion. For Makor Chaim, the community that I'm a part of, it was a little bit different because that is a community that's really about in-person meeting. And so it felt really tragic initially. But because it's sort of in many ways a young community as well, that is really about community organizing, really about kind of growing and changing and evolving, very quickly that sorrow morphed into, well, how do we start to view this as an opportunity? How do we say, well, it's not so great that we have to be on Zoom together. It's not so great we can't meet each other, but how can we become sort of better at taking care of each other in this time? How can we become better at connecting? How can we use this online medium as a way to do the coolest services you've ever had? So it really, it sort of bounced from that sorrow into this real creative period for us.
Maybe now thinking about, as you go in, we're in third lockdown now. We're getting started. How is it feeling now for the community, the online community particularly?
Yeah, we had regular services, regular workshops, and really built a community from November until March. And that really framed people's lives. There was always a Monday something, and there was always a Friday something, and sometimes there was a Thursday or Sunday something. And people really connected with one another. And especially since, again, sort of thinking about the makeup of our community, people with disabilities, people who are far away, people who have young children, like all these people sort of being able to be a part of things because of the online medium. And so, I've started having conversations with community members about, okay, well, when we go back, like, what do you want this to be like? Would you like to stay online? Would you like to be in person? How about being in person with options for online joining. And by and large, it's been, no, stay online. Don't go back to in person. No. Like at our Passover Seder on Sunday evening, I think it was, you say at the end of the sort of festival meal for that, where we tell the story of the Exodus, and we kind of embody it through rituals. You say at the end, next year in Jerusalem, and someone said next year in person, and then there was this huge slew of people in the chat being like, no, it's been acceptable to me because not in person.
Absolutely.
Which is so I've been heard loud and clear.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I'm actually thinking about online and women, that particular thing, as you say, you know, with people who've got disabilities, or they've got young children, or just various conflicts of responsibilities. That online space has been really quite a refuge. And it's quite interesting when we're thinking about the spiritual engagement populating the online system. Before pandemic, we didn't think about the online system like that. We saw the online system as possibly something was a bit dangerous, you know, and it can be obviously as well. Thinking about that spiritual engagement, I wonder how you would reflect on those deeper values that possibly have been developed within the pandemic. And I say that with caution, because obviously this pandemic has been awful for a lot of people. A lot of people have died. A lot of people have died trying to work in hospitals and engaging with those who are suffering. So not to underestimate that impact. So I'd be really interested to hear about whether this experience has changed people's long-term views of spirituality and of their engagement with spirituality within your communities.
Well, I think what it's done actually is reminded ourselves that, you know, Judaism has never been about a building. And I wonder if it's actually the same thing with Sufism. You know, it used to be about a building in temple times, where there was a specific place where you had to go in order to worship and make sacrifices. But since the destruction of the temple, you know, we had to reinvent Judaism then. It became we became the people of the book. We became the people of words and stories and prayers. And we made our tradition portable. And it's been portable ever since. And we've always ever since we had the destruction of that central location, had to figure out how to evolve with each new transition. There is a philosopher from the 20th century, Abraham Joshua Heschel, who really affirmed that Judaism is not a religion of space, it's a religion of time and sanctifying time. And the Sabbath, the Shabbat, the day of rest is our great cathedral, right? It's these markings of the cycle of the year and of the festivals and of being together in community that really define us in our spirituality. It's not where we can go physically. Unfortunately, in the Orthodox community, people aren't able to use electricity on Sabbath and festivals, so it's made it quite a lot more difficult for them. But certainly in the progressive community, you've seen these communities that are huge and established that really love their synagogue, and the building is such a part of what they do, and there's this love and attachment for it. And they're having to relearn that we are not a religion of space, we're a religion of time, and we're a religion of connection.
I think that's really interesting, actually, because obviously the Muslims will go to mosques, and that's often their center of worship. As Sufis, you may go to a mosque, it depends on the tariqa you belong to, but you may also have a place called a zawiya, which means actually a corner. And it was a place that people coming to and from the mosque would talk, and they'd stop at the corner and they'd talk about things. And these became locations, lodges, you might say in English, Sufi lodges, where people would eventually go to recite and to meditate and to read and think and discuss as well. So again, we have that link to a physical place in a way. And we've often gone to Morocco. We have a Mother Zawiya in Morocco, where once or twice a year people try to go. And it's a very international community. So we've been really, really missing that connection. But our teacher has said, actually, pandemic has made everybody's homes a Zawiya. And what you're saying about this connection online, so it's out of physical space. It's almost out of time because you're connecting with people all over the world in different time zones. So it's a spiritual space, which is almost dislodged from the usual parameters of life that we recognize. And it's a kind of elevated space with all its drawbacks. We're really looking forward to going back to the face-to-face gatherings and all of that. But there is something, I think, about that experience that has made people reflect on the deeper qualities. And I like what you said about Judaism became portable. It had to become portable. And I think all spiritual practices, they're carried within people. And it says, it's been said that people are only meanings standing up. So Islamically, individuals are just meanings standing up.
Oh, wow.
Which is amazing, isn't it? It's that sense of you are only, should be only meaning, you know, and the paraphernalia we need to discard through this life. So this has been a really interesting conversation. I'm very excited to hear about your community, your communities, and your experiences in pandemic. And I think we're coming towards the end of our time. But is there anything finally you either want to say or contribute or even ask us as a similar but slightly different community?
I mean, I think, where does the grief go? Because we've definitely seen so much death. We've seen people feeling cut off and isolated, and like all these wonderful things that have come out for our communities. There's sorrow there, and I'm wondering sort of how your community has dealt with that sorrow and grief, or has thought about dealing with that. And I have a question for us about how we will hold that grief.
I think that's a question a lot of people are asking themselves. We had one week, we have an online gathering across Europe. And during the pandemic, there was occasions where people would be praying for someone who'd got ill. And there was one week where the names of people we were praying for just got longer and longer and longer. And that was a real shock to know that this number of people were actually suffering. And I think at that point, I did take a big intake of breath and thought, my word, we've been so positive. We've been pushing through and keeping positive and keeping up with our practices. But there's an impact here that's going to be felt much later. It's going to impact much later. I think that's going to be a challenge for all communities. And my hope and why we're doing this event is because what we want to see after the pandemic is communities coming together. So we do see across the world, you know, inter-ethnic violence. We see political divisions and extremism growing. And I think it's up to our communities to reflect on where we are as individuals and as communities first, and then to reflect on how we interact with other communities, particularly faith communities, to keep the communication going, to not be drawn into that political polarity. I think that's the big danger going forward, that grief turns into anger. And that's something we have to really work hard to neutralize, I think, across the globe. How would you reflect on that? Or
Well, I think I connect to the fact that it definitely needs to be on our minds, because unprocessed grief can be so damaging. And we also have times in our service where we sort of both have a healing prayer, and people are invited to share names of people they're thinking of, and a prayer for the dead. And they're very close to one another usually, at least in the services that I lead. And you get these lists of names. So there are regular moments to kind of stop and honor. But I also wonder about kind of, surprisingly, we've developed a lot of rituals around mourning, communal mourning and individual mourning. over the years. And I wonder about kind of looking at Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, which is a day that traditionally commemorates the destruction of the temple. Both temples, in fact, are said to have been destroyed on those days, but also has come to be associated with different calamities in Jewish tradition and Jewish history. And so there are these communal gatherings that are just about holding the sorrow, reading the Book of Lamentations, doing mournful singing and mournful chanting and keening. And I wonder if there's a place for mourning this destruction in the pandemic within the context of that Memorial Day. Or also just being inspired by it to create another ritual when we come out. Like I love ritual, and I think it has such power to help us construct meaning in our lives, because things can feel so meaningless and often are. And then you have the power of these tools to do something that helps you reorient. And so I think there's space for a ritual to celebrate when we go back, and there's space for a ritual to mourn. Drawing on the things that we have.
Absolutely. And I think it's that affirmation of life through ritual and through communion. And it's also not forgetting the pain that people have gone through. And it's getting that balance correct, isn't it, as we go forward? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yael, this has been really interesting conversation. I do hope to continue it in the future in new contexts, hopefully post-pandemic. And I appreciate your time and the reflections on your community. I hope you all fare well through the rest of this pandemic. We all come out the other side hale and hearty, as many as possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay. Ma salama, shalom.
I'll draw you up from the water, from the well, from the sea. You are the keeper of ancient wisdom. You are the desert and the deep. I'll draw you up from the water, from the well, from the sea. You are the keeper of ancient wisdom. You are the desert and the deep. Oh, me, Chama, Bahelim, Shaddai. Oh, me, Kama, Hadar, Bakodesh. Oh, me, Chama, Bahelim, Shaddai. Oh, me, Kama, Hadar, Bakodesh.
Thank you both so much, Dr. Asma Bygate and Kohanet Yael, for such a great insight into the Kohanet Yael's Jewish community work and some great concepts of, portable faith and the reference to the Islamic idea of people being simply meanings standing up. It really shows that common humanity that we all share, especially in times of crisis. I'd now like to introduce a dialogue with people from my hometown in Birmingham, led by Hamid Lee, who is the Muqaddam and leader at the Zawiya in Small Heath, Birmingham, and along with some use on their reflections on the pandemic and on the relationships they have in the community. I personally know everybody on this dialogue, and they are wonderful people and great ambassadors for the Qadri Bashishi Tariqa.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Zawiya, which is in Birmingham, the UK's second city. Zawiya is an Arabic word that literally means corner, a place where one can look out on the world from a point of inner gatheredness, a place where the divine is remembered and where students of a Sufi spiritual master gather to receive guidance, knowledge, and illumination. We are very blessed to have the guidance of Sidi Jamaluddin al-Qadri Bushish, may Allah increase his light and spiritual station, and the constant support of his son, Dr. Moulay Munir, in helping us to make the Sufi path fully relevant to the needs of the time. May Allah reward him abundantly for all his efforts. The Zawiya is much more than a place of spiritual retreat, but also a thriving community hub that provides a range of services aimed at benefiting those most in need in the local community. I will now pass you over to Sidi Ibrahim, who will introduce you to the range of activities and services that the Zawiya provides.
Assalamu alaikum. The Zawiya runs a range of activities ranging from social welfare projects to the weekly circles of divine remembrance. These circles of remembrance provide a means for the seeker on the spiritual path to connect to the divine through individual, collective, silent, and loud invocations. The Zawiya has the honor of hosting such gatherings to men and women of all ages. The spiritual practices pursued are rooted in knowledge that guides intention, action, and shapes our inner worlds. Therefore, a short period of study is included in every gathering that covers the prophetic tradition and Islamic jurisprudence. The Tariqa Qadriya Bushishiya, which is the Sufi order practiced at the Zawiya, recognizes the important role the youth play in our community. Thus, a balanced program of spiritual education, divine remembrance, and activities have been set up to nurture our young members. The Scouts group provided our youngest members the opportunity to build skills in a wide variety of fields, from first aid to sign language. Physical activity, linked to increases in physical and mental well-being, through the playing of sports like football, have allowed increased ties of kinship between the youth who have grown to become more than friends, but companions on the spiritual path. Trips to Wales in the British countryside have allowed the youth to socialise with and learn from the older disciples in a serene and peaceful setting, away from the hustle and bustle of the urban city environment. Stewardship of the earth is a core value within the Islamic tradition and something that our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, practiced and preached. As such, at the Zawiya, environmental and ecological projects have taken place over the years to address and redress some of the negative environmental impacts we as humans have caused. Litter picking within the vicinity of the Zawiya Centre has highlighted the alarming issue of plastic waste within our community. As reported by our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Allah is beautiful and He loves beauty. Therefore, members of the Zawiya took it upon themselves to beautify a derelict and dying patch of earth opposite the centre into a beautiful street garden covered in plants and flowers. Furthermore, the Zawiya invested in a plot of land at a local allotment where individuals, groups, and families from the Zawiya have taken responsibility to grow and cultivate fresh organic plants and vegetables to benefit the wider community. In line with clean and environmentally friendly methods, the noding method of gardening at the allotment is proving to be successful in growing produce, whilst ensuring that the rich soil life is not disrupted and allows nature to take its course. Outreach programs at the Zawiya have been instrumental in bringing different communities together under the banner of peace, harmony, and mutual understanding. The Sufi Mindfulness program has brought people to the Zawiya from right across the European continent who are interested in learning more about Sufi culture and the spiritual path. This program has also covered aspects of mental health and well-being, healthy eating and nutrition, and improving personal relationships, presented through engaging workshops in the Zawiya Centre and in other venues across Birmingham. Our adult singing group, Safa UK, and our youth choirs, Wujdan and Al Fitra, have performed across the UK and as far afield as Morocco, Ireland, and Italy. The Sama' or spiritual audition is a form of divine remembrance which involves poetry, providing gems of instruction, spiritual insight, and tastes. The Sama' element of our outreach programs proved very popular due to its unique harmonies and ability to uplift the listener's soul. The current coronavirus pandemic has meant that we've had to change the way we conduct not only our outreach projects, but our weekly circles of divine remembrance. Nonetheless, these programs have been adapted and have now moved online, providing a great source of comfort and spiritual connection during these difficult times of lockdown and physical separation. We ran a popular online Sufi mindfulness course with participants across the UK, which they found to be insightful and inspiring. We now leave you to enjoy this short clip of Sama' taken from an outreach program delivered in High Wycombe.
The pandemic has affected all of us, often in very different ways. Young people have faced particular challenges. Let us now find out from a group of young people associated with the Zawiya how their spiritual practice and support from family, friends, and the Zawiya has helped them through this difficult time. I wonder if you could just share your experience.
Yes, thank you, Sidi Hamid. There have been many challenges during the pandemic. Being a key worker and working with vulnerable children, and my husband also being a key worker, it was imperative that we work during the pandemic. And the biggest challenge we faced was taking it in turns to work during the day and then come home and homeschool the children in the evening, because we were really worried that the children would fall behind on the education. And also the level of anxiety was very high. The children were very, very anxious, and staying strong and comforting them was another challenge as well. Thank you.
And Sidi Qasim, how was it for you?
Assalamu alaikum. For me, the pandemic, the biggest challenge for me was the fact that there was a major gap between my education and being a mostly practical course. I had loads of gaps in my knowledge. Also, I found that I noticed a level of anxiety within myself that I had not noticed before. And this pandemic made it clear to me.
So, okay, thank you, Sidi Qasim. Nusayba, how was it for you during the lockdown? Were there any difficulties that you faced?
Not be able to see my friends and family, and the other people from the center Zawiya. Not be able to have my education. I think I've seen a big impact of my life in that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's many people, I think, have felt the lack of time spent with friends. What about you, Sidi Bilal? What was your experience?
with my experience, I would say my biggest problem is the lack of education that I had, and also had a lot of anxiety from schoolwork, because I wasn't inside the lessons, and I wasn't having the same benefit as being inside the lessons, and I felt I wasn't studying, and I wasn't learning as much as I used to, and I felt I was behind, and I also developed a lot of anxiety about that as well.
So, yeah, clearly a shared theme in terms of academic pressures, relationship pressures. And for you, Sidi Hassan, what was your experience of lockdown? What were the challenges that you faced?
I think the challenges that I faced personally was having to go outside every day during the main lockdown last year in March, still having to go to work due to myself being a support worker. We had to interact with loads of people on a daily basis that were very, very scared of COVID and the pandemic and didn't know what to do. So we had to make it seem as though we were very calm about the situation, even though inside, I know myself and my colleagues were very, very scared at the time. But as time went on, we sort of became one group through our colleagues, and we battled it together, and we managed to achieve a good sense of mental health and well-being through the companionship that we have with each other.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so there's a reflection on the COVID experience from the workplace experience. Whichever way we look at it, there are clear challenges. So now I'd just like you to ask you to think about how any spiritual guidance you have received has helped you meet and overcome these challenges. Rana Sania, could you share something in that respect?
Of course. I would definitely say that the spiritual guidance that I received through my mentor really helped me cope with the pandemic. It helped me to remain stable mentally and focus on maintaining that spiritual calmness inside of me. I have a lot of anxiety, so I definitely feel as though the pandemic, as others have said, has really heightened that. And I also had a baby right at the beginning of the lockdown, back in March 2020. So as you can imagine, it was quite a new experience. It was quite a challenging experience, but I think without my mentor's spiritual guidance, I definitely would have felt much more alone and much less able to cope.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Sidi Hassan, you shared with us a little bit earlier about the workplace and the companionship. Could you say a little bit more in terms of how any spiritual guidance helped you through the difficulties you described?
Yes, absolutely. The path definitely shed a lot of guidance on what we should be doing during this time. Although we had a lot of difficulties adjusting to the unprecedented circumstances that we are now still a part of, unfortunately, we got a lot of mental health guidance. We had a lot of help from the tariqa on what we should be doing, how we should be acting, how we should be supporting people. And we were given a lot of love from those around us, even though we were all struggling at the same time together. And it really did impact us very, very much.
Thank you very much for that. Kirsten, would you like to add a little bit more?
Yeah, I'd like to say that the support I received from the center definitely helped me in regards to we had online gatherings, online talks, where we shared advice and guidance and how we can overcome these feelings of anxiety. And these collective but online gatherings definitely helped to soothe my anxiety in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much. We've all been through a difficult journey, all in different ways, as you've described. So now, hopefully, we're looking forward to easier times, inshallah. So, just in a few words, I wonder if you could just say a little bit about what you're looking forward to most once this period of lockdown eases, inshallah. So, Nusayba, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to being reunited with the other people from the Zawiya Center, seeing my friends again at school, and the big impact of education that I lost. To be honest, to go out to shops and be free and go on holidays again.
Wonderful, wonderful. Sidi Bilal, what about you?
Yeah, I would really want to, once lockdown finishes, see everyone at the Zawiya. Obviously, you can see them online, but it's not always the same. And I always want to meet those, and also meet my family that I haven't been able to see, and the people that you took for granted now that they're gone, now that you want to see them more. It's people that you didn't think you wanted to see, but now you do.
All right, thank you very much. Lala Ambreen, what about you? What are you looking forward to most?
There's actually several things that I'm looking forward to, but one of the biggest things is meeting my fellow companions and doing the invocation in a group, physically being present with everybody, and meeting my mom. My mom's been shielding because she had some health issues, and just meeting her and giving her a big hug. That's something I'm looking forward to.
Oh, really, something very, very special. Sidi Qasim, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to going to visit my spiritual master once again in Morocco. I felt that our bond hasn't broken, but it's that yearning to see each other physically that I'm definitely feeling.
Right, thank you. And Lana Sania, what in the coming weeks and months, what new experience opportunities are you hoping to benefit from?
I would have to say exactly what everyone else has said in relation to going back at the Zawiya and spending time with my companions. And my companions at the Zawiya who have had babies as well, I'd love to just be able to just speak to them about my experiences and share experiences and share advice, and just also just human interactions again, just being able to hug each other and not be so distant. That's definitely what I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, often it's the small things that we really appreciate. Finally, Sidi Hassan, could you just share with us what you're looking forward to?
Yes, Sidi Hamid. I am looking forward to spending time with my companions as I once did. Looking back, it was wonderful times, which I, as Sidi Bilal said, took for granted. And I cannot wait to get back to the center, inshallah, and spend time with all of my companions and go on trips again, as Sidi Muhammad mentioned earlier in the introduction, specifically Wales, which was an amazing time with the Fuqara, the people of the path.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody for sharing those personal experiences of a very difficult time, and your reflections on what was personally valuable to you, and those precious things that you're looking forward to. We can see from all of this that we have been through a collective difficult time, but we have, inshallah, emerged stronger, more grateful, more united, and appreciating all the amazing gifts that we receive every day. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much to Mr. Hamid Lee and everyone in Birmingham involved in the making of that very engaging and inspiring film. It's wonderful to see the contribution to community initiatives at the Zawiya Trust and how the young people there are continuing to be involved and engaged in their community during the pandemic. We now move to a short film of spiritual songs brought to you by the Birmingham Qasaid groups. One of the poems they are singing speaks to the themes of this evening in this way. O you who want to know my art, ask God about my affair. My states, which are revealed from the mystery, are veiled from people. It is in proximity and far beyond servitude that you must seek me, because no trace of me remains in the world. My origin is spiritual, because I was spirit before servitude. When I returned to my homeland, I regained my freedom.
لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله صلوا على رسول الله نظرة يا أبا الزهراء مدد سكين الحجرة نظرة يا أبا الزهراء سكين الحجرة حياتي روحي ذكره عنها وهو لا أسأل لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله صلوا على رسول الله. There is no God but Allah. There is no God but Allah. There is no God but Allah. Blessings upon the messenger. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Sallu ala Rasulillah. Sweet praise upon the chosen one. He is a light for everyone. Sweet praise upon the chosen one. He is a light for everyone. The mercy on the universe. Blessings upon him forever. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Sallu ala Rasulillah. Mawlaya salli wa sallim daiman abadan. Mawlaya salli wa sallim daiman abadan. Ala habibika khairil khalqi kullihim. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Sallu ala Rasulillah. Allahumma salli ala al-Mustafa. Allahumma salli ala al-Mustafa. Habibna Muhammad alayhi salam. Habibna Muhammad alayhi salam.
In the city of Mecca there was born a prophet.
In the city of Mecca there was born a prophet.
His aim is to guide us from darkness to light.
His aim is to guide us from darkness to light. Allahumma salli ala al-Mustafa. Allahumma salli ala al-Mustafa. Habibna Muhammad alayhi salam. حبيبنا محمد عليه السلام.
A light upon light, نور على نور.
A light upon light, نور على نور.
His face is so blessed, الوجه الكريم.
His face is so blessed, الوجه الكريم. اللهم صل على المصطفى. اللهم صل على المصطفى. حبيبنا محمد عليه السلام. حبيبنا محمد عليه السلام.
May the blessings of Allah forever shine on you.
May the blessings of Allah forever shine on you.
We love you, Muhammad, peace be upon you.
We love you, Muhammad, peace be upon you. Allahumma salli ala al-Mustafa. Allahumma salli ala al-Mustafa. Habibna Muhammad alayhi salam. حبيبنا محمد عليه السلام. لا إله إلا الله. الله الله محمد رسول الله. محمد رسول الله. تو زندہ ہے واللہ زندہ ہے واللہ. تو زندہ ہے واللہ زندہ ہے واللہ. تو زندہ ہے یا رسول اللہ. تو زندہ ہے یا حبیب اللہ. سب جہانوں میں زندہ ہے واللہ. اللہ 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 اللہ. لا الہ الا اللہ. اللہ اللہ محمد رسول الله. محمد رسول الله. أنتم حي والله. أنتم حي والله. أنتم حي والله. أنتم حي والله. أنتم حي يا رسول الله. أنتم حي يا حبيب الله. أنتم حي في كل العالمين. الله 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 الله. لا إله إلا الله. الله الله محمد رسول الله. محمد رسول الله. لا إله إلا القليل ماذا يطيل الكلب يا راحة القلب العليل فيك اجتمع كل المراد فيك اجتمع كل المراد الله الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
How amazing. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce you to exercise sessions that were held at St. Maria Church in Paris a couple of years ago. It was organized by the church and invited VSMF, a Sufi organization in France mentioned previously, as well as some other religious and cultural organizations from different backgrounds to contribute their own spiritual traditions. Enjoy. Let us pray. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammadin wa barik wa sallam. And start with a saying from our great Sheikh Sidi Moulay Jamal Uddin, who mentions, "Our way is a universal way. You will see wonders in it, and it is a healing for all humanity." May Allah grant the Sheikh and his family the best of health. Ameen. We ask Allah to send his blessings to every man, woman and child who has been affected by this pandemic and grant them peace and health. By his grace may he send a covering of health to all communities across the lands. And we ask for him to bless everyone who took part in this event, from the contributors to the organizers to the listeners and the keynote speakers. May by the mercy of Allah, He allow good health and healing and oneness to each other in all humanity. From everyone at Bridging Spiritual Cultures, stay safe. Ameen and Ma Salama.
Ameen. Thank you, Lala Asma, for that beautiful dua, that beautiful prayer. And it is now time to draw a close to what I hope, and we all hope, you will agree has been a wonderful evening of sharing, celebration, and spiritual connection. Many thanks once again to all the contributors and volunteers whose efforts have brought us this benefit. And most especially, wherever you are joining us from, we'd like to thank all of you again for being here and sharing these precious moments with us. We hope in the future to do many more events that bridge spiritual cultures in order to help deepen our understanding of Sufism and promote learning, mutual understanding, and exchange across diverse spiritual traditions. But for now, and to close, we wanted to remember the fact that through the test of this pandemic and the confinement and restrictions it has brought us, so often it has been seeing the faces of the ones we love, even on these digital platforms, that has lifted our spirits, warmed our hearts, and reminded us that this love of each other and of all creation is the goal of our spiritual path. Giving greetings of peace to each other and to all is one of the fundamental teachings of Sufism, in the beautiful example of Muhammad, the beloved of God. Blessings of God and peace be upon him. The great Sufi teacher, Sidi Hamza al-Qadri al-Buchish, may God be pleased with him, once said that in the garden the flowers are many, but the water is one. We hope this short film will be as refreshing to us all as a garden of flowers.
Assalamu alaikum from London.
Assalamu alaikum from London.
Salams from Manchester.
Assalamu alaikum from Birmingham.
Assalamu alaikum de Paris.
Assalamu alaikum. We are Fuqara from Paris.
Assalamu alaikum de Nantes.
Assalamu alaikum du nord de la France.
Assalamu alaikum de Bordeaux.
De Normandie.
De Toulouse.
De Nancy.
Salam alaikum d'Aix-en-Provence en France.
Salam alaikum. Nous sommes le groupe de Lyon en France et on vous salue bien fort.
Assalamu alaikum de Marseille, France.
Assalamu alaikum de Bruxelles.
Assalamu alaikum Luxembourg.
Salam desde Barcelona.
Assalamu alaikum brothers, sisters.
Assalamu alaikum desde España.
Assalamu alaikum de Porto.
Assalamu alaikum Liès d'Algérie.
Assalamu alaikum min al-Urdun.
Assalamu alaikum from Saudi Arabia.
Assalamu alaikum from Dubai. Assalamu alaikum from Italia.
Assalamu alaikum from Poland.
Assalamu alaikum from Amsterdam, Hollande.
Assalamu alaikum von der Belgien.
Assalamu alaikum in Deutschland.
Assalamu alaikum from Malaysia. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh from Mexico.
Assalamu alaikum from Phoenix, Arizona.
Assalamu alaikum from Rhode Island, USA.
A
big salam from New Jersey, USA.
Assalamu alaikum from Boston, Massachusetts.
Assalamu alaikum
from Harlingen, Texas.
From North Carolina.
Salt Lake City.
From Las Vegas.
From California.
From New York.
Baltimore, Maryland.
السلام عليكم from Florida.
السلام عليكم سيادي الفقراء والفقيرات. Ramadan Kareem from Orlando.